Knowing that even magical chains could bind gods, Su Qi naturally felt their extraordinariness. Even so, Su Qi believed they might be above divine artifacts. Thus, sensing that the World Tree Root was trying to break free of some of its bindings, Su Qi immediately came over to see if he could set up an early interception. Catching even a small fragment would be enough. And now, Su Qi looked at the mountain in front of him. It was only after he pulled in Otto that they could barely intercept a piece of the fragment. It was evident just how massive the entire chain was, and the countless chains binding the World Tree were even more astonishing. Though we've succeeded in intercepting, collecting this is going to be a bit of a hassle, Su Qi said, stroking his chin thoughtfully. To be honest, he had only wanted the fragments that would break off, not expecting to accidentally obtain such a gigantic piece. Even if he cleared out the rooms of the Holy Light Corridor, it still wouldn't fit. It was too big. Although I don't know why Brother Su you would want this thing, but if you want to store it away, it's going to be quite troublesome. Otto extended his hand. Let me help you. The next moment, Otto handed Su Qi a ring. This is one of our dwarf race's important storage treasures. A forger can craft at most 5 in their lifetime. Each one is used by clansmen to store various materials used for smithing. No matter how terrifying, dangerous, or powerful the material, it can be stored within. I gift it to you now. Otto spoke with great gravity. Su Qi silently looked at the ring, but did not reach out to take it. Otto paused, noticing that Su Qi didn't reach for the object as eagerly as he did with anything else before but was instead looking at him. He asked, slightly puzzled, "Why aren't you taking it? What kind of question is that? I'm not the kind of person who covets others' possessions or takes things for free," Su Qi said softly. Otto frowned with suspicion. "I just don't believe it. Previously he'd taken anything he could from everyone, and for things he couldn't take, he'd signed a large number of IOUs. I want to thank you," Otto spoke softly, looking over his shoulder at the robustly growing World Tree. "I've longed for the day when the World Tree would revive for countless years. But when it actually happened, it felt so unreal. To be honest, he was the second to know that the World Tree seed had been successfully planted, witnessing the World Tree root rise from the pit. At that moment, he couldn't believe his eyes. It wasn't until the will of the World Tree returned, providing guidance and rewarding each of their countless years of guardianship and struggle. A multitude of light spots fell, distributing among the people. Everyone's World Tree leaves underwent an immediate change, shimmering with a burning light. As for why Otto thought Su Qi was the one who saved everything, it was naturally because the massive amount of light spots, far exceeding everyone else's put together by 1,000-fold, 1,000,000-fold, were all heading towards Su Qi. This meant that the revival of the World Tree's will had countless connections with Su Qi, which naturally couldn't be hidden from them. "No need for thanks, to be honest," Su Qi paused. "I've already received enough, you don't owe me anything, and besides, you've already helped me a lot before. I'm someone who pays attention to details and doesn't like unearned rewards, so accepting this ring would only make me feel uncomfortable." Otto looked at the earnest Su Qi, his expression a mix of complexity, touched and resigned. "But you won't be able to take this thing away without this ring." Otto's eyes looked at the cold iron fragments. "Though I don't know what material it is, it's definitely something as divine as, or even more so than a divine artifact. If researched and utilized properly, perhaps many extraordinary things can be created." "Yes, I think so too." Su Qi paused. "So, Otto, my brother, you keep it." Otto was startled, pointing to himself. "Me? But isn't this what you've obtained?" Although he'd helped, in fact, it was Su Buxian who played the decisive role. His magic cube domain, even though just a tool, had astonishing strength, blocking the path of the chain fragments. Su Qi smiled. "But isn't this exactly what you need the most, Otto, my brother? A piece of divine iron, or something even beyond? Isn't it every forging master's dream?" Otto's body trembled slightly. But he didn't want to admit that Su Qi had hit the nail on the head, knowing from the moment that chain fragment landed that it was an extraordinary material. Although he had suppressed that desire, he had to admit he was greatly tempted. It's like a top chef encountering the finest ingredients. Otto, my brother. It's not that I need it, but that it needs you. Su Qi's voice came softly. Otto clenched his fist but shook his head with difficulty, his voice hoarse. No. Brother Su, you may not know what our race believes in. We believe in fairness, trade, order, although forging itself is a means for our race to grow. But this gift is too grand. I can't accept it. Is that so? Su Qi touched his chin, unconsciously exposing a sly and amiable smile. Then let's meet in the middle. It's time to leave. If you, Otto my brother, are willing, let's go together, and keep it for me. In the meantime, you'll have full authority to study and forge with it, to help you take your forging abilities to the next level. These words were quite sincere. Touching Otto somewhat, he looked at Su Qi. Can we really do that? In his view, whether this item could be forged and used was another matter. Just considering its other traces and its terrifying defensive power, taking it to auction would surely fetch a sky-high price immediately. Yet Brother Su actually allowed him to use and study it at will, without the slightest worry about the potential for forging failure. Of course. Su Qi patted his shoulder. Otto, we're brothers. All right. Otto nodded. His eyes filled with a surge of emotion. I won't refuse then. Once we leave, hand it over to me, and I will definitely study it thoroughly. Su Qi. Then I'll trouble you. A light smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Otto was quite easy to deal with. Honestly, while other people could be bound to the Hustlers sect using various methods, getting everyone to join and become a true part of the sect was still too difficult, as each person had their own powerful backing. Of course, Su Qi hadn't planned to turn them into full-fledged members of the Hustlers so quickly, either. But Otto was different. Su Qi recognized his technical skill and his sequence ability. From the beginning, Su Qi had prepared to treat him as a core member, eventually offering him a contract as the Hustlers' chief engineer. Moreover, Otto's character was different from the others, too honest. Using other means to bring him in wouldn't be good. Now, things were progressing smoothly, not only because of Su Qi's sincere treatment of others, but more importantly because Su Qi had discovered something. That ring was an important secret treasure for the dwarf race, a legacy of the race. It generally would not be given away lightly. And when Otto handed it over to him, Su Qi had already realized Otto's race. His homeland had seemingly been utterly destroyed. While survivors might exist after countless years had passed, it would be extremely difficult for him to find them again. So, that's why, under Su Qi's gentle persuasion, he had agreed to accompany him. Of course, Su Qi's offer to accompany him was a lie. Probably while researching, he would become the Hustlers' sect's chief forging master. Soon, Otto stowed the item away. And take this too, Otto, said Su Qi, as a starfire chip appeared between his fingers. We don't know what might happen when we leave. Although we have the World Tree Leaf to guide us, it will be more convenient to stay in touch with the chip, as everyone else has one. Okay. Otto took the chip in his hand, and the starfire chip transformed into a symbol of starfire on his wrist. At this moment, back at the previous stronghold, everyone else had already climbed up along the World Tree roots. Where are they? Deep Blue looked excitedly at the towering World Tree roots reaching into the sky, took a deep breath, and although it had taken them nearly half an hour to climb up, his emotions still hadn't settled. He couldn't wait to find Su Qi to find out what had happened at that time. They also saw where the numerous light points went and felt the recovery and guidance of the World Tree's will. Don't know, but since we're out, the starfire chip won't be affected. Let's contact him directly through the chip, suggested Old Five, initiating a call to Su Qi with a thought. And very soon, Su Qi's voice rang in everyone's ears. Folks,
Brother Su.
Don't rush. There's limited time. As the only one with any understanding of the outside situation, let me say a few words first. Everyone paused. Limited time? Although you all have important missions ahead, please be aware that the changes in the outside world are not that simple. I have copied all the data to everyone's chip. With the guidance on the chip, at least you won't be so lost. Also, welcome back to the present world. Su Qi didn't say much, Nor did he convey too much information, and he spoke in a quick and clear manner. Everyone still had various questions in their hearts. But Old Five slowly looked up. Now I understand what Brother Su meant by limited time. Everyone else looked up as well, and in their line of sight, the world tree roots had grown to a certain extent, already touching that singularity. And there was still a burst of brilliant light points, with the singularity's black and white mist constantly twisted, struggling. At this very moment it was directly breached. The singularity has been opened. Deep Blue's body trembled as he witnessed this scene. Having waited from ancient times till now, they finally saw what they had never dared to dream of seeing. At the same time, everyone felt a terrifying force of attraction descending. They were at the core of the outside gate galaxy. The singularity had been punctured, and although they were naturally able to get out, they were also subjected to the terrifying gravitational pull. Everyone was uncontrollably flung into the air, caught in the crazy twisting, whirling. But fortunately, they were enveloped by points of light from world tree leaves, which sheltered them. See you outside. And Deep Blue also looked at everyone, nodded solemnly and solemnly declared,
Brother Su,
we owe you a huge favor, an absolute life-saving grace. Rest assured, we will definitely. The next moment, Deep Blue couldn't continue because the holograph in front of him had transformed into a list, densely packed with numerous entries. All the debts they owed. Below, a line of text slowly surfaced. Don't worry, I remember them all. There was some silence among the group, their heads clouded by the joy of leaving. They had almost forgotten about this. No matter what, let's now buck up. Deep Blue spoke gravely, his voice reaching everyone's ears. Now, it's time for us to return to the stage. At this moment, the singularity had already collapsed, and whether it was space or light, everything around was twisted, flung out. At this moment, everyone also lost consciousness. Only the sanctuary of the world tree leaves flung them away from this place. But Su Chi was the only one who remained conscious. Because he had too many points of light, and since he no longer had a world tree leaf, those points of light, emerging from himself, couldn't immediately find a place to flow into. As a result, they were all absorbed by the blue mark on the palm of his hand. Now the points of light that had spilled out were protecting him, but just this small amount was already enormous. I remember it was after that volcanic giant, the demigod from the gate world, left, that I got this blue mark on my palm, which occasionally absorbs some special things, but I didn't expect it to absorb even the energy of the world tree. Su Chi wasn't in a hurry. The mark didn't pose any danger and was instead highly valuable for research. It seemed, however, that his current strength was not enough to unveil its mysteries. At this moment, Su Chi was also flung from the singularity, and frankly, not much could be seen. All was chaotic darkness, with the previously visible star river and numerous gate worlds flashing wildly, spinning rapidly. It was already in total disarray. However, the world tree roots had burst forth with dazzling light from the central singularity. The will of the world tree was guiding everyone, with many sheltered figures turning into light balls, all flying towards a huge black and white door. And although a lot had happened, it all occurred extremely swiftly, in almost the blink of an eye. Everyone had been flung inside. Even Su Chi couldn't help but feel disoriented, as if his senses, his body, had been twisted. By the time he gathered his bearings, he was already lying sprawled out in a space clearly demarcated in black and white, and behind him stood a towering mountain. Not a mountain, but white keys, his reward. So many, really? A great number of white keys turned into light balls and were collected by Su Chi, with the quantity skyrocketing.
Su's eyelids twitched.
Although he had brought the Shadow Army directly out when leaving, intending to exploit a bug, Su Chi also thought it might not work as this place was already different from the normal gate world. However, a loophole is still a loophole. Apart from the additional rewards paid out inside, everyone else just by leaving, each will get nearly 50,000 keys. Su Chi looked at inside the holy light corridor. nearly 8,000 black shadows crammed into the room. This time, I've really struck it rich. Su Chi looked at the number of keys, which had stopped increasing, and the mountain behind him had also completely vanished. In total, there were over 400 million white keys, which was an astonishing number even if one were to remove several digits from that total. The amount reached such a terrifying number for various reasons. First, it was because of the bug that Su Chi had discovered, and of course, due to the special nature of the Black Shadow Core and the Spirit House, it seemed like he was the only one who could exploit this bug. Second, the place he had entered was special, the deepest space, where a singularity had been sealed for countless years, along with the terrifying old days and the decaying roots of the world tree. This place could be considered the deepest part of the Gate World, the center of the Star River, where entry and exit were as difficult as ascending to heaven. Thus, the rewards were also extremely generous. Otherwise, one could never reach such a large scale. At this moment, Su Chi looked down at his feet where there was a black and white boundary, and lifting his gaze, the black and white boundary extended to a gigantic black and white machine. He strode over to it. Previously mentioned, the sum of the sequence of keys needed for the lottery draws, 2, 4, 6, 8, etc., and the general formula for such arithmetic sequences, n equals a1 plus n1 d1, and the sum of the first n terms formula being, or Sn equals n a1 plus n slash 2. But I digress. In a nutshell, Su Chi could draw about 20,000 times now. 20,000 draws. Even if Su Chi wasn't very lucky, with this number of draws, the probability of drawing legendary character cards was likely to be astonishing. And Su Chi had already arrived before the black and white machine. He had tried to bypass it earlier to see what was behind this machine. However, he could only see the long side. No matter how he moved left or right, the black and white boundary remained directly beneath his feet. This piqued Su Chi's interest. To be honest, after experiencing various events inside the Singularity World, he had a deeper understanding of the old days, and the current old days Gate World and the black and white machine, as well as the black and white bear playing the role of GM, all made him feel that the old days operated on some vast set of rules, and moreover, the previous Extreme Punisher made Su Chi involuntarily think of the Terminator that joined forces with the evil god to destroy the entire Immortal Path dimension. Although the connection was unknown, it was anticipated that he would eventually encounter it, and since there were no countdown restrictions, Su Chi naturally could stay in this place for a while. After all, once he left this time, he might never have a second chance to enter. Meanwhile, in the control room of the black and white Gate World, which was quite spacious, everywhere were dense holographic screens, displaying all the people entering the black and white world. At the same time, many mechanical black and white bears were in charge of various holographic screens, transferring a vast amount of data to the central control console. And at the very center, the true black and white bear sat on a high platform, leaning against a chair, staring at these numerous holographic screens. Finally, we've reached this point. The long-lasting calm is about to be broken. The black and white bear muttered to itself. This time has also drawn to a close, and next, no matter how many character projections from within the old days emerge, they'll also be able to add a few more traces, becoming an opportunity to awaken. Unfortunately, it shook its head. From the current point of view, only a few key strength entities have been drawn from the real hubs. The drawn strength being referred to naturally meant the character cards, as all the black and white machines generally produced character cards, and these characters were projections from the depths of the old days. And now, after checking the data, the real orange legendary character cards had not been drawn at all. This was normal, after all. The stronger the entity, the deeper it was buried, and the old days would try to limit and oppress them in every way possible, making the chances infinitely small, nearly impossible. In contrast, nearly 100 golden character cards had been drawn. At this moment, apart from the first group that had already reached the core land, others were gradually arriving, but it was almost the end now. Never mind. There's no hope left at this point. It's simply impossible for anyone to draw out those characters. The black and white bear idly played with a gear. The previous Great Tide of Hordes was the most astonishing moment, and because of that first batch they had the most white keys. And yet, They failed to draw any of the strong individuals from the old hubs. And now, the latecomers were continuously rushing here, and the keys on their person were also pitifully few. The black and white bear naturally held no hope, because although the number of people still wasn't small, the operation of the black and white machine wasn't about numbers. It was about luck. The more someone drew, the greater their chances would be. The white keys invested were like connecting the traces on each person to the traces deep within the old days. When someone else took over, the probabilities would simply reset. Sigh, draw quickly. It's about time to wrap things up here and get off work early. The black and white bear grew increasingly calm. It glanced at the many holographic screens that were generated and then disappeared rapidly. Disappearance meant that the person had already left the black and white world. After all, not many people would waste time on drawing. After about 15 draws, they were in a hurry to head to the core land. However, at this moment, the black and white bear's eyes turned slightly, focusing on one of the holographic screens. The other screens all ended in just a few minutes, at most half an hour, but this one, I feel, has already lasted an hour? He stretched out his hand and lightly tapped. The holographic screen instantly appeared in front of him. His gaze fixed on the screen, and his expression altered slightly. He now understood why it had persisted for so long. The person in front of him had not gone to the black and white machine to draw, but instead used various means to research the space and the black and white machine. Jumping back and forth, throwing various objects, he even activated the instant move ability. Interesting. The black and white bear, instead of feeling bored, squinted its eyes and said with an abnormal smile, "It's the first time someone has spent so much time here researching this place. But he's getting a bit overconfident." The black and white bear giggled. Perhaps he still doesn't know. It stretched out its hand and tapped again. The originally holographic surveillance screen then changed again. It directly turned into a 2D side-scrolling black and white screen, and Su Chi was just one of the pixel characters, with the black and white machine simply turning into a pixel drawing at the edge of the screen. This is essentially a 2D side-scrolling platform pixel game. The black and white bear chuckled lightly. But this is the true essence, the essence of the old days. This black and white boundary has only 2 dimensions, only forward or jumping up, with no left or right options. So, no matter what he did, it was of no use. Things that don't exist simply don't exist, and he couldn't reach the edge. If he ever realized this point and managed to leave that black and white boundary, it would attract old days extreme punishers to erase these pixels. The black and white bear whispered, "You should know. We were once destroyed like this." And at that moment, the black and white bear seemed to receive a warning, as if it couldn't discuss this topic at all. It looked at the black and white on its body with a mix of coldness and apprehension, then giggled, "I'll just say a bit. Better not to come here." The screen returned to normal, as if the 2D screen was just an illusion. The black and white bear calmly looked at the scene, and honestly, from the beginning, it had been conversing with everyone through a pixel screen. It was a kind of self-mockery. "It looks like he has finally given up," the black and white bear observed as Su Chi no longer attempted and seemed ready to start the lottery. The black and white bear suddenly paused, because Su Chi stretched out his hand and stopped in front of the black and white machine. Then, a large number of white keys transformed into light points and were thrown inside. The black and white bear showed some interest. This guy actually has thousands of white keys. He seemed to be tossing in thousands at a time. That was quite good among his successors. And the white machine also supported batch draws. The next moment the entire white machine roared loudly. A series of white lights flashed one by one. The black and white bear glanced at it. Unfortunately, the luck wasn't good. They were all white quality. These characters were some of the most superficial existences of the old days, not leaving much trace, which also indicated that this person's future had reached its limit. Strength and potential, fame, etc. were not strong. That should be the end then. The black and white bear was about to close the screen, as the so-called drawing was very quick, inserting all the white keys, bursting out character cards, and it was exceedingly rare for some special items to appear. The process took just a few seconds, and when the black and white machine judged that the opponent's keys were insufficient for another draw, it would transform the remaining keys into something else. Then it would forcibly send him away from here into the so-called core land, which had nothing to do with himself and could not be probed by any means. And the next moment, the black and white bear suddenly froze because Su Chi touched his chin, observing the white quality light balls being automatically gathered up, then stretched out his hand again. Another pile of key light balls was thrown into the black and white machine. Oh? Black and white bear, are you alright? Why are you drawing in batches? There are no miracles in single draws, only batch draws to gamble on luck. And this time it was still all white quality light balls. The black and white bear's eyelids twitched, and it grimaced with a strange smile. This guy's luck is really too bad. At this time, others would at least have 2 blue quality as a guarantee, but this guy has all white. According to the Traces theory, the old days had its own classification. White represented the unknown. Blue represented some small fame. The black and white bear shook its head, readying to close the screen again. And the next moment, its eyes trembled as Su Chi once again raised his hand, throwing another batch of light balls into it. Not again. The black and white bear was stunned. How do you still have more? Moreover, this time, thousands of white keys were continuously thrown in. The black and white bear squinted its eyes. Which power's young master is this? Which race's heavenly pride? That's not right. The black and white bear realized something. That all this time, Su Buxian's hand had been raised and never put down. Within a few breaths, another few thousand white keys were thrown in. It seemed he was still unsatisfied. Then, a massive burst of white light balls erupted, batch after batch relentlessly thrown into the black and white machine. Every second saw tens of thousands of white keys consumed. The black and white bear frowned in shock. What the heck? Are you a divine son from somewhere? Or the young master from a top-tier powerful force? The highest one. I remember gathered nearly 500,000 white keys. All the keys of his followers concentrated in one person's hand. Even reaching 500,000 was quite astonishing since each person had to consume keys to enter, and more people meant stronger suppression from the gate world, making it more difficult, and the risks of triggering extreme punishment and losing keys increased. Often, doing this would result in a deficit. But this guy, he had already thrown in 100,000 and hadn't stopped. Moreover, this guy really has bad luck, it exclaimed, widening its eyes. There are way too many of white quality. While there were also quite a few of blue quality, that must be due to the increased probability after throwing in so many keys. This guy must be cursed with ominous. The black and white bear really wanted to make a snide remark. However, soon the white quality ceased to appear, as the guaranteed minimum was blue, followed by the emergence of an even higher quality, purple. Purple represented famous in the Star River. Such characters, all well-known figures in the Star River, were extremely rare. When the purple light balls appeared, Su Chi paused for a moment and then, after a couple of glances, continued lifting his hand unabatedly, muttering to himself. A bit slow. Slow? What's slow? The black and white bear suddenly trembled as an intense light gathered and burst forth. Lots of light balls flashing violently and thrown into the black and white machine. The black and white machine, as if powered at full throttle, roared violently with severe vibrations. The black and white bear's eyes widened. 100,000, 500,000, a million. Blue, purple, gold, various character cards were crazily produced, with gold being extremely rare but becoming relatively common due to such an input. This guy must have rigged it. The black and white bear was utterly shocked. Yet it had not stopped. With 1 million as the starting point, it still wasn't over, already reaching the level of 5 million. At this moment, purple had become the guaranteed minimum. A massive amount of gold continued to be produced. The black and white bear had already stood up from its seat, trembling involuntarily. Although all this was beyond its expectations, with such a terrifying amount, it truly might draw an orange card. And more importantly, it had no idea how many white keys Su Chi still had. So, every second felt like it could be the last drawing. hoping the next one would produce an orange card. But this guy's luck was really awful. Approaching 10 million keys, yet still not a single flash of orange light appeared. What rotten luck! Constantly hitting the minimum. No one pulls cards like this. The black and white bear was going crazy. Nearly 10 million white keys have been used now, yet there still hasn't been a glimmer of orange light. It couldn't help but go mad. After all, it had felt that hope was slim before, but now, it seemed as if a tycoon-like figure had appeared. How could it not feel a bit of anticipation? After all, it knew what orange represented. Golden character cards were dreadful dominance, already very powerful and widespread among believers within the boundary. But orange character cards, they represented true power, each bearer worthy of the title epic-making, each a strong leader among gods, and each name typically followed by the suffix, the master. However, most importantly, once drawn, it signified that the restrictions buried deep in the old days had loosened slightly, simultaneously establishing a connection with the present world. With traces left, there was a possibility of recovery. That was what it yearned for. But looking at Su Qi, it still wanted to complain, its eyes emitting real flames. This guy has the worst luck. At that moment,
Sui stopped.
the black and white bear's gaze trembled, its heart cooling by half. Indeed, it still couldn't be done, could it? Sat back down, somewhat trembling. Indeed, after all, nearly 10 million white keys had been invested. But if it didn't work out, what could be done? Such was fate. The black and white bear sighed. The next moment, Su Qi's screen still didn't disappear, its eyelids twitching slightly. What was this guy doing? In the screen, Su Buxian directly brought out a table, then placed a statue and several plates on it, even including offerings. Then he lit several sticks of incense and solemnly began to say something. The black and white bear widened its eyes. Indeed, you know your luck stinks too, right? On Su Qi's side, he had already resorted to metaphysics. He could tell his own luck was indeed horrible, always just the bare minimum, only occasionally there was a flash of gold. He also hung up a good luck charm, a clover necklace, then pulled out a speaker to play some auspicious music. In short, he took out all the items that symbolized good luck. He murmured, "Lastly, I'll trade Evil God's life to exchange for as much as you want. Bring some good luck." After Su Qi finished his chant, he calmly picked up a few pieces of offerings from the plate and ate them. All right, invoking the god was successful. Let's continue. He began to immerse again, wondering where to start from. Numerous light balls began to be invested at a faster rate than before. How much does this guy have? The black and white bear stared wide-eyed at this scene. Honestly, this guy exceeded his own expectations. For the first time, it saw the black and white machine rush to emit sharp, high-speed rotating gear sounds, booming non-stop for half an hour. Then this time, when he had invested close to 50 million, although the golden character cards were still not a guaranteed pull, Su Qi's eyes suddenly moved. Suddenly, an orange glow flashed violently. Exclamation point! The black and white bear clenched its fist tightly. Finally! Damn it! It worked! Its face half smiling, half demonic like a bear, was extremely excited. Damn! Watching others draw cards was always thrilling. However, it was also incredibly thrilled because it knew the old days had finally been linked to the present world. At this time, Su Qi also stopped, squinting as he reached out to grasp the orange light ball in his hand. Name. Quality. Orange character card. Function. Through distant, unreachable spans, it can project and summon a sliver of its strength. Duration. 5 minutes. Note. Please use any character card carefully. Do not have excessive contact or communication with beings from the depths of the old days. Otherwise, ominousness will accumulate on you. Pixelated again. Su Qi muttered to himself, not overly surprised, as everything from the old days had such traits. The blood demon was like that, and so were the various deeply hidden things in the Gate world. However, as long as it could be used, Even the warning in the note, Su Chi wasn't concerned, though it mentioned ominous. He had encountered it before. Moreover, it wasn't over yet. At this moment, the black and white bear could no longer see Su Chi's screen, because the whole screen had started to flicker, followed by a flurry of static. Disconnected. No! Its body straightened up, ignoring the shock, and was now intently looking into the distance, a serious expression on its face. The ominous from the depths has been stirred. That guy is being targeted by the extreme Punisher? Because a dangerous aura of ominousness was appearing intermittently. It was the air of the old days, a fuse that if lit, would attract the extreme Punisher. But it was somewhat puzzled. After all, it understood the old days and ominousness more than anyone else. Ominousness had to accumulate to a certain level to draw the attention of the extreme Punisher, and this level was quite preposterous. Often, it was those who deviated from the norm, stood in high places, and were discontented with their own destinies, who would touch the taboo and be contaminated by ominousness. But this guy shouldn't have. Even as a mere 7th rank, stepping into the old world generally wouldn't touch any taboo. The probability of being tainted by ominousness was lower than expected, and even if tainted, he wouldn't have much impact on the old days. The slight taint he had was not ominousness but more akin to just having taken a couple of puffs of secondhand smoke. Nowhere near enough to harm himself. The more traces there were, the more they could suppress it, which is why many were able to explore the old days. Unless one actively touched upon taboo, they could gather more ominous omens, until they attracted the presence of extreme punishers. But those low-level taboo breakers simply weren't qualified to get close. But Black and White Bear's eyelids twitched as it looked at the old chaos from the old days. Because right now, the atmosphere of ominous omens was even denser, rolling in black and white. What on earth had that guy done now? Did he violate the heavenly commandments? No good. Black and White Bear couldn't sit still. Its eyes narrowed, and it directly activated its ability, with gears thunderously turning. The whole space was changing. Even as the black and white on its body trembled, it seemed that such action would bring about disastrous results. But Black and White Bear still didn't stop its efforts. This guy had to be saved. If he were to be killed, those traces would never again have the chance to touch the present world and the previous hopes would come to an end. Black and White Bear moved, disappearing from its place, and its entire figure appeared as a terrifying projection in the endless old days. It, too, was a divine being, just an unknown one in the present world, all its traces buried deep in the old days. It was closing in on Su Chi's previous coordinates. The black and white world was the only place where one could truly come in contact with the real old days. Generally speaking, no one would stay inside for too long, but this guy was an exception. He had already stayed for nearly an hour before drawing cards. It was now drawing near to that place. Within the old days, twisted threads were connected to that light ball, and right now the surrounding old days substance was immensely dense, gathering frantically. The denser the substance of the old days, the more ominous omens the individual carried. If one could suppress it with the traces on their body, it would be all right, but clearly this guy had no means of suppression. Such dense old days would, in just a short time, attract those extreme punishers to come. The strength burst forth. Different from the black and white, a splendid light shot out as a ray with extreme speed. Boom! Couldn't get too close. Otherwise, with all the ominous omens it carried, this place would be completely overwhelmed, and it would also violate the rules, directly attracting extreme punishers. Meanwhile, on the other side, Su Chi silently watched the screen on the black and white machine, which flickered with a snowflake pattern before slowly showing the pixelated image of Black and White Bear. Black and White Bear began to speak seriously. But Su Chi was already walking up, slapping the screen frame. Caught a virus? Or is it Panda burning incense? Black and White Bear. It gritted its teeth. Stop slapping. Listen to me. Although I don't know what you've done, your situation is extremely dangerous right now. It spoke hoarsely. Leave immediately, and take good care of your orange character card. It's okay to waste the key, life is more important. Su Chi paused for a moment. It's not wasted. I've already finished drawing. Black and White Bear nodded. That's good. The tens of millions was already outrageous, so it was expected that it would end like this. I'll help you leave. Black and White Bear immediately took action, forcibly opening a path through the thickly wrapped layers of the old days. At the top of the black and white boundary, it also rolled tumultuously, as if about to split and reveal the inside dense black and white. He looked at the dense black and white with some surprise and muttered to himself, "No wonder I wasn't forced to leave. Turns out it was forcibly delayed. Although I don't know why you're helping me, you're quite a nice guy." Black and White Bear just remained silent, then slowly said, "Use that orange character card cautiously. Although it's powerful, it can get tainted with ominous." This was both a warning and an admonition. Understood. Su Chi smiled, his form becoming twisted. But his gaze turned towards his item slot, the more than 20,000 light balls. 1 orange? No, 50. When 4 billion white keys were put in. No matter how unlucky Su Chi's hand was, what should appear would still appear. Of course. Su Chi didn't dwell on those orange light balls for too long but slowly looked towards the one in the very middle. It was something entirely different from the others, a black and white color that was dense to the extreme. Was it a new quality character card that burst out during his last couple of draws? Or a tool? Su Chi did not know. Because the information was all encrypted this time, the pop-up from Ancient Paradise only displayed some special information about the object. Era of Immortality. And Su Chi, of course, was not satisfied with just that. With all his spiritual power driven, he used a question mark to see a bit more information. Hub in the middle. Eternally indestructible. Ancient glory. With each word he saw, the surrounding black and white grew denser, and the black and white bear widened its eyes, cursing as it watched the scene. Divine gold. How ominous to have reached this point. It felt the strain, but fortunately, the channel was still open, and the twisted power was taking Su Chi away. Before the passage opened and he was teleported away, Su Chi looked at it. "Brother Bear, thank you for your hard work. Without your help, it would have taken me some more time to get out of here." Black and White Bear? What a big talker. Do you even know the situation here? Just take some time to get out. Next time we meet, I will present the gift of the Hustlers sect. And the next moment, before Su Chi could finish his words, he vanished on the spot. The black and white bear cursed in a muted voice. "Too much talk. Talking about a next time. Do you really think you can just come and go as you please here?" It let go, and the dense black and white rushed over to engulf it. Such an astonishing omen. That extreme punisher must be approaching. However, the black and white bear seemed much calmer. Working here, it wasn't just acting as a GM, but also getting its hands on more resources that touched the taboo. The next moment, black and white burst from its body. All the black and white realms, the black and white machines, they all shrank crazily, gathering in its hands into a tiny gear ball. "Let's roll." The black and white bear flipped the middle finger at a distant aura. Though it had 4 fingers and no middle finger, but that didn't matter. Plunged downwards. The traces on its body were slowly covered, flickering with spots of orange. What it didn't know was, the place where Su Chi had been was now a complete mess. The so-called two-dimensional plane hadn't stopped Su Chi's exploration at all, and the space was filled with Starfire. Even the Starfire station was slowly operating on its own. That black and white bear really is, just like me, a great good person. Su Chi was being teleported through the twist, with countless images fading around him at the speed of light. He muttered to himself. Otherwise, it would have indeed taken me a bit more time. He had already felt the approach of that ominous presence when he began drawing numerous orange character cards. He could squeeze through slowly using Starfire, but it would probably take much longer. Luckily, the black and white bear had intervened. And the reason it intervened was the charge it gave me before leaving. It seems these extracted light balls are very important to the depths of the old days. Su Chi was no novice, and his collection of fragments of information about the old days had uncovered a great deal. And that black and white condensed light ball. He squinted his eyes. Through the collection of traces from the information fragments, he could roughly guess what it was. It was each person or object buried within the old days hub, standing at the pinnacle of epochs most glorious. The key was those two words. Indestructible. These words seemed to say that no matter how many epochs passed, their traces would always remain, everlasting.
Sui no longer pander.
That was still a bit distant, and to explore its secrets, it seemed necessary to increase his spiritual power. But in the present, he was focusing on the impending chaos event. In his sight, all the twisted images were changing, this very moment, as if Su Chi could hear demons laughing maliciously, gods roaring fiercely, and countless people desperately yelling. The next moment, Su Chi's eyes suddenly went dark, and after a brief disconnection of consciousness, his senses awoke as if from a dream, bringing the perceptions of the outside world. And then, a calm voice, genderless, emotionless, just slowly started to resonate. Welcome to the abyss. Welcome to the abyss. Su Chi hadn't heard this phrase in a long time, and he could be sure that this place was still within the present world. For the moment, he had only transferred through a spatial passage and had not returned to his personal space. As the most iconic phrase in paradise, its appearance here was quite abrupt and strange. However, at this very moment, that voice seemed like an illusion and had already disappeared. Instead, a blurred transformation brought about another kind of voice. People around him were whispering, "It's sacrifice day again. The figures in the wilderness are very strange, dangerous, terrifying. Let's wake up those two unconscious guys first." Two? Su Chi slowly opened his eyes. As soon as he did, he found himself lying in a small cabin, a feeling that felt somewhat familiar. After all, it was in a small cabin where he awoke the first time he entered an instance. Though this cabin was dilapidated, it was still quite clean. Unlike his first time stepping into the killing demon town, where the cabin reeked of disinfectant and beneath it lay a mass of rotting corpses and flesh. And the two people. Su Chi looked beside himself, at a Nan who was still unconscious, leaning against the wall. It seems that when I entered the black and white world, he was pulled out as well. That black and white world was very special. Aside from myself, no one else could enter, even if placed within the holy light corridor. Su Chi did try to pull out the black shadow core of the spirit house for some exercise. But just when he made that move, the entire black and white world seemed about to collapse with ripples spreading. A bit like overloading, and then the graphics card would start spinning, leading to a screen crash. And most importantly, ominous terror seemed ready to engulf everything. Su Chi then gave up on that idea. At this moment, from the current situation, it seemed they were brought here due to their unconsciousness. And the strange figures in the wilderness mentioned by the people just now, and the sacrifice day all had some explanations. Click! The wooden door was gently opened. A middle-aged man carrying a longbow entered, his body radiating a different aura. His gaze fixed on Su Chi, who had woken up. "You're awake. To wake up so quickly in such miasma, you're indeed not an ordinary person." Su Chi paused. "He's not an ordinary person either. Don't believe me? Let me help you wake him up." He went over and pressed on a Nan, and a piercing electric current simulated pain. And Nan's eyes widened dramatically. F***CK. That hurts. The middle-aged man was silent for a moment, without speaking or showing surprise at the electric current and energy that Su Chi had just released. And Nan somewhat dazedly touched his head. "Where is this?" "This is." The middle-aged man looked at them calmly and said softly, "Extremely evil world." These 4 words, Su Chi mumbled to himself, seem familiar. From the very beginning, the words extremely evil had run through the entire event. It seemed this truly was the core land. However, as Su Chi was preparing to ask, at this time, sounds of a bell suddenly came from outside the cabin, seemingly with a warning. Upon hearing the sound, The middle-aged man raised his head to look out the window of the cabin, his expression darkening as he lifted his bow. I know you have many questions, just like other outsiders who come here, but don't worry, we will answer everything. You two should wait here for a moment. I need to deal with some matters. Someone will come soon with some food. We'll talk about this place after you've eaten. Su Chi watched the middle-aged man hurriedly leave. He stroked his chin. This feels damn familiar, just like the small town before with the same bell sound. And someone was indeed going to deliver meals to this cabin. But the only difference was the person had changed, and unlike Mary Maid, who had killing demon practically written on her face from the first glance, this middle-aged man seemed like a good person, or perhaps this place wasn't as wicked as before. And Nan was still a bit confused at this moment, looking around, and then opened a window to see the architecture similar to a small town outside. Somewhat absent-minded, have I really left the old days? He was still in the thrill of coming to the outside world. And Su Chi knocked on his head. Can you keep up with the updates? Where are we now? And you're still hung up on those old days. How can you blame me for that? And Nan's eyes widened. Wasn't I always staying in that room? The last time I came out, it was in that pit of the old days on a mission. This is my first time seeing the outside world. Oh, seems like it. Su Chi paused as well. But that's not important. And Nan? First, tell me, did you enter that black and white realm? You mean that place with a machine set up? And Nan nodded. I've been there. And also, that white keycard, I drew a bunch of blue character cards and a few purple ones. And Nan regretfully said, it seemed there were even more advanced ones, but I didn't draw any. And Su Chi, wait a minute. Is the divine son himself favored? Damn it. Such good luck. I've thrown out a bunch of keys, all white quality, all bare minimum, only then did I get a flash. And as a result, this guy is so doggone lucky from the start. But it seems then, and Nan was also acknowledged, which is why he could enter the black and white realm and draw. And Old Five, Divine Eye, Deep Blue, and the others at this very moment should also have gone through the same process and arrived in this world. So, Brother Su, what exactly is this place? And Nan slightly extended his hand and pushed the wooden cabin's window open a bit more, broadening their line of sight this time. They could see that the entire sky dome was a dark red, and everything in the distance was obscured by indistinct fog. I'm not sure, said Su Chi calmly, his gaze also drifting towards the sky. That must be the miasma they were talking about. Honestly, if this place was the same world as the small town he first entered in the instance, Su Chi definitely couldn't recognize it. After all, he wasn't in the same place and he had only stayed in that small town and besides, probably had undergone drastic changes by now. And Nan, looking at the dark red sky and the distant fog, felt uneasy. I can sense a dangerous aura from there. It doesn't seem to be simple. Of course, it's not simple, Su Chi spoke lightly. The middle-aged man who came in before wasn't an ordinary person but a solid 7th rank in strength. He was surprised that we woke up in that miasma, which goes to show that place has a dangerous influence even on people of the same strength. Anyway, don't oversimplify this world. And Su Chi had also noticed that the middle-aged man mentioned outsiders. It seems that other people had also entered this place. At that moment, someone knocked gently at the door. You outsiders, your food. Su Chi opened the door, and standing there was a dirt-smudged youth with a few freckles. Not very powerful, but also around the 9th rank in strength. He brought the food in and placed it on the table. This food of yours. And Nan suddenly paused. Why does it feel strange? All colorful. He looked at the food with a weird feeling, the items seemingly emitting a sinister smoke. Facing in Nan's questioning, the youth didn't show any guilt but simply shook his head lightly. If you don't understand the rules of this world, to survive, to get through that fog, you have to accept things like this. Also, what stage do you think we're at? It would be pointless to play the old poison in food game now. Su Chi managed to smile. Then please explain. The youth earnestly said, this world has been greatly polluted. and all food ingredients can only be obtained from a polluted environment. Whether it is polluted plants or animals, eating food made from these can better resist the pollution. The youth also slowly took out the jerky from his pocket, which also had the scent of pollution, and put it into his mouth. Everyone is the same. After the youth left, Anand stared at the food, deep in thought. Brother Su, what do you think, was he lying? No, he wasn't lying. In a polluted world, the most terrifying thing is spiritual pollution, which can pervade every aspect, and this food helps them gain strength and some spiritual resistance. But if it exceeds the critical value, they won't be able to resist the pollution and will become polluted monsters. Anand was stupefied. Brother Su, how do you know so much? Su Chi gave a non-committal chuckle. Because, damn it, I'm all too familiar with this. The second instance was encountering the tentacle man in the apartment, a world that was polluted and falling apart. Wherever the pollution spread, there was mental collapse and all kinds of bizarre monsters, and the tenants in the apartment could only live by hunting every day. This was precisely the same deal. Go ahead and eat. This stuff is harmless to us. It really can enhance spiritual resistance and provide some strength. Anand nodded, not harboring any suspicions, took a few bites, and then nodded. The flavor seems quite good. What about you, Brother Su? I'll make some snail rice noodles. Anand wasn't a main user of spiritual power. He needed resistance against pollution to prevent his spiritual power from decreasing too quickly. And Su Chi didn't need this at all. He was far too familiar with this pollution. What's certain is, this world must be related to the evil god. After all, Brother Evil God is the source of pollution, the source of downfall. After finishing the meal, Su Chi and Anand didn't continue to linger inside the wooden cabin but pushed the door open and walked outside. There was no obstacle. This small town could probably accommodate 2,000 to 3,000 people, and although most of those who remained seemed to have become more than just ordinary people under the influence of the polluted food, possessing at least the strength of Sequence 9, they were all incapable of forming a combat force, just women, children, and the frail elderly. Only someone with the strength like that of the middle-aged man from before could be considered combat personnel in this small town. However, right after the bell rang, they seemed to have received some kind of message, and they were now not in the town, apparently having entered the fog. Let's go. Let's check out the place where the bell was rung. Although this town was not the same as the original one, it was clearly from the same world with a similar style. And the people around them were not like the butcher, hunter, woodcutter, and other killing demons from before with murderous glints in their eyes. Instead, they were cowardly and silent, without asking questions. It feels like everyone's spiritual state is very fragile. Anand said in a deep voice, is it really because of the pollution? Normal. Living here day and night, with the constant threat of unknown dangers, it's no wonder everyone's spirit is affected. This scene. It was like this in Su Chi's second entry into the world where Tentacle Man lived in that final home. Nevertheless, some people were still training and practicing. When Su Chi approached the place where the bell had rung, Anand paused slightly. To find a church in such a place? Why? Su Chi, on the other hand, squinted at the church built beneath the bell tower. Never mind why. The various patterns on the church looked very familiar indeed. However, the church seemed to be sealed off, with no worship occurring, and something inside appeared to need protection. Su Chi looked a few times when a soft voice came through. This place suppresses the pollution around it, and there is a certain strength inside that keeps the demons from daring to come close. Su Chi turned his head. 2 others had appeared beside them, seemingly outsiders as well, wearing clothes that were out of place in this environment. You guys! Anand had just begun to express his confusion. Let me introduce myself. One of them, wearing a hat, gently took it off. My name is Rab. And I am. Another person had a handsome face and an impressive air about him. Su Chi paused. Rado. Holding his forehead, he said, I freaking go by, Lu Fan. We are also from outside, but we came earlier than you. You are probably the latest outsiders we've seen. Su Chi paused. The latest? How long has it been since the first group entered here? It's been about a week. Then wouldn't we be far behind? Su Chi murmured while stroking his chin. Behind. Rab shook his head gently, smiling warmly. Everything here is not simple. Everyone is desperately exploring. With no gains, there's no such thing as being behind. And Nan couldn't help but interject from the side. So, gentlemen, can you tell us what exactly is going on here? Of course, Rab said softly. But there's no need for us to tell, you will understand soon enough because the ones who went out to fight should be returning. They turned their gaze towards the distance. Boom, boom, boom. There were huge figures seemingly colliding in the fog. The middle-aged man from before was rapidly leaping towards the town. At the same time, huge demons roared, fiercely trying to step into the town. Despite their wretched and wary demeanor, the middle-aged man and his people did not hide. And the next moment, from the church at the very center of the town, a tremendous force burst forth, flashing with a brilliant white light. The shadow of an axe suddenly appeared, repelling the giant that sought to step inside. A massive axe emerged horizontally, seemingly a projection, yet it radiated a holy light. The enormous outline appeared within the fog, exuding an amazing aura, but it simply couldn't step into the small town. And Nan looked at the axe. His eyelids twitched slightly. Why does this axe feel? He murmured. It's like an ordinary lumberjack's axe. But Rab extended a hand. Shoo! Silence. Although we agree with your opinion, however. Lu Fan glanced around. Please be aware, this axe is the guardian force of this town. At this very moment, the townspeople witnessing this scene weren't surprised. As they looked at the projection of the axe, each one made a praying gesture. Although that church doesn't allow entry, it seems that people here hold it in high regard. So let's refrain from speaking disrespectfully. And Nan nodded. I understand. Despite being a divine son, and having seen many impressive items, as well as knowing many shrines that protect parts of the world capable of morphing belief, he was still surprised to see such a simple object of sanctuary. So, that giant just now. Rab nodded gently. Yes, that's what we just mentioned. The greatest danger of this world. Demons. The word softly expelled from afar. The middle-aged man, leading his combat personnel, carrying large bows, came over. They seemed to have been through numerous battles. Their clothes stained with a bit of dust, blood, somewhat ragged. This is a dangerous world infested with demons, and the only places where one can survive are a few sanctioned survivor towns. Although survivor towns are scattered around the world, somewhat disunited, there are many of them, at least tens of thousands of towns. The middle-aged man looked at Su Chi and Anan. As well, there exists the opposite, the demon towns. Although few in number, they are all concentrated in one area, forming a moat-like succession of challenging barriers, filled with monsters and demons, like the most terrifying ramparts. Forming a barrier? And Nan was puzzled. Shouldn't they be actively attacking? The middle-aged man shook his head. This, I do not know. It seems they are guarding something important, and this place's dark red hue also comes from the very center of that demon town. However, the middle-aged man shook his bow, his eyes looking into the distance. We believe the only chance to escape this doomed sky might only lie in that place. And Nan suddenly paused. Aren't you the original inhabitants of this world? Some are native, but most people. The middle-aged man shook his head. Are outsiders thrown into this world, including us?
Sui understood.
The convergence of the entire dark zone was, in fact, the attraction of a vast amount of worlds within the entire boundary, also bringing in a large number of lives, a great part of which, probably under the horror of pollution, turned into one kind of monster or another. But, inevitably, there are lives that survive and grow amidst despair. Understood. Su Chi suddenly spoke up. But if there are so many survivor towns in the world, do they all rely on that projection for shelter? The middle-aged man shook his head. Follow me. He led Su Chi and Anan towards the church. Rab and Lu Fan didn't follow them. We've seen it already. Go ahead. You'll know what to do next once you're there. We'll wait for you here. They quickly reached the entrance of the church. The middle-aged man didn't pull out a key. Instead, he held out his hand, bowing respectfully towards the distance. Reverend Father, please. In their line of sight, a white light slowly appeared, and an elderly figure stepped forward gradually. He was dressed in a priest's garb, unlike those of the evil sect. This man truly had the holy light, and carried an air of kindness and peace. Who is this? Anan was somewhat startled. The middle-aged man spoke softly. This is one of the world's original inhabitants I just mentioned, and it's the Reverend Father here who established this place, providing sanctuary for countless survivors. The priest, however, gently shook his head. It's all God's guidance. Su Chi squinted his eyes. He had some thoughts and doubts, but before entering and seeing the scene inside, he held off on expressing them. Everything here was somewhat strange, not that the town in front of them would have any bizarre or odd enemies, but the part he was familiar with seemed to have changed. The priest placed his hand on the church door, where a ceremony was slowly displayed, and he also moved his lips, beginning to chant. A very advanced ceremony. A voice came from Luo Shinfu's side. He had been watching too, and at this moment he pondered softly. It doesn't seem like something the world's natives could control. Indeed. Su Chi also softly touched his chin. This place was the lair of the abyss. Based on his original speculation, this world likely had completely collapsed. Not a trace of possibility to survive, but unexpectedly, there were those who had lived, and under some guidance established sanctuary towns. Moreover, they were everywhere in the world. It seemed something unknown to him had happened. And the church door, as the ceremony opened, slowly revealed the true face within. What was placed within was not, as they had guessed before, an axe or something else, but a sculpture positioned at the center. This is the secret that allows us to resist demons, as well as the savior of us all. The priest made a devout gesture of worship in prayer. The middle-aged man did so as well. Anan gave it a look. When in Rome, do as the Romans do, so he too raised his hands. Then he glanced at the motionless Su Chi and nudged him quietly. Brother Su, you shouldn't remain still. Respect other people's beliefs. You make a good point. Su Chi strangely observed the statue. But why does this statue before me look so familiar? And why does it resemble me so much? The statue before him, though its face was obscured, had a shotgun slung over its back, a butcher knife in its right hand, and an axe in its left hand. Isn't this the statue of the despicable person that was erected in my honor? How could it be here? June 6th, 3 years ago, we call it Demon Day, because on that day the once peaceful world suddenly saw a terrifying shadowy figure appear, covering the skies, visible to the entire continent, said the middle-aged man. Su Chi's eyebrows rose. As soon as he heard this, he knew when it had happened. Wasn't that the exact time he came to that little town and took the evil god's eye, and that terrifying shadow was naturally the projection of the evil god's fury and strength? Everything matched up. Although Su Chi knew that the world would collapse under the onslaught of the abyss power, he had not expected it to turn out like this. And what was the deal with his statue? At this moment, the priest was still narrating. Although the terrifying shadow appeared for less than a minute, it was the beginning of the calamity. The pollution spread slowly from the location of that shadow, enveloping the entire world in 7 days. We call it the Black Week. The priest slowly continued. In fact, at the end of the Black Week, although the world fell into darkness and chaos, the real destruction had not yet come. At that time, some people fell into mental collapse, turned into monsters by the massive pollution, but there were still a large amount of militaries suppressing, with nations united, formulating lots of strategies to resist the monsters. They also discovered the traits of the pollution which drive people mad and turn them into monsters, so the government started to use and manufacture a lot of sedatives to prevent mental collapse turning into monsters. The priest said, this period lasted for a month and even for a time, suppressed the chaotic situation. Su Qi said nothing. Indeed, like in Tentacle Man's world, although the pollution monsters were strange, they weren't all that powerful, not reaching the strength of a sequencer. At that time, he was only around level 3, not even a sequencer, and he dared to take them on head-on, let alone the military forces with plenty of firepower and weapons. As long as it has a body of flesh and cannot dodge, with no other means of defense, they wouldn't withstand heavy firepower. Unlike sequencers who all possess spiritual energy. That month was called the Eve of Dawn because at that time we all believed it was not the apocalypse, that as long as we could suppress it, dawn would come. Until the priest slowly clenched his fist, his body trembling slightly. Until the birth of demons. And Nan couldn't help but speak up. Is it the giant we just saw? No, that giant was just a collapsed monster created by pollution. A low-level demon. The middle-aged man shook his head. The Su Qi was familiar with. Put simply, it's a more dangerous pollution monster. The priest softly said. The demon at that time burst forth from the location of the shadow, a true native demon, with a huge demon eye that misled people's hearts. A pig-headed demon with human body, effortlessly destroying key strongholds. The priest's voice trembled slightly as he recounted. It seemed as if he was trying to draw out all the terrifying and desperate scenes from that time, and indeed, there were not a few native demons. Listening, and Nan's brows also increasingly furrowed. So, what does this have to do with the statue before us?
Suilaitli spoke.
He had probably grasped an outline by now, but if it was really like what he thought, the appearance of the sculpture still seemed somewhat abrupt. That was the most desperate time for us because we discovered that demons truly existed in the world, along with supernatural powers, and that there were eerie and desperate oddities. A great number of armies were easily destroyed, countless people ran madly for refuge, but there was not a single tranquil place in the world. And it was at this time that the miracle descended. The priest slowly turned around. A holy light, like daylight, pierced through the vast darkness, illuminating everything. It penetrated the entire world and then fragmented into countless fragments that fell upon people in different regions. This light was divine guidance from God, showing us how to survive this dreadful apocalypse, just like constructing an ark. Su Qi's gaze flickered. Holy light, miracle, and this guidance. Indeed, a great deal had happened. This place becoming the core land, the commencement of the opening act, must have a reason. In his mind swam a raft of thoughts, with different fragments of information in flux. Although he hadn't grasped the main point yet, it seemed he was vaguely discerning an outline. Later on, the priest softly said, those who received the guidance knew what the demons feared. Following the rituals given in the guidance, they created sculptures with the demons' dread. At the same time, they started forming a large number of strongholds with the sculptures as their core. Since then, the era of combating monsters with various firepower ended, and we welcomed Awakening Day and the Long Search Day. I understand Awakening Day. And Nan paused. It must have been when you received the guidance, discovered how to become stronger, cultivated spiritual energy, stepped into the sequence, and so on, gaining the strength to contend with demons and monsters. But what does Search Day refer to? The middle-aged man gently said, actually, we were sent to this world half a year after Demon Day had appeared. And I, just like you, have asked this question. The middle-aged man's hoarse voice drifted lightly. Now I can answer for you. Legend has it that the true demons are killed by the holy artifacts, and if one can find them, they can possess immense strength, and gathering all of them, one might even be able to strike into the demon nest. Find a way to leave this terrible world. And Nan exclaimed in surprise, so how many holy artifacts are there? And how many have been found now? The middle-aged man shook his head with a somber look. There are more holy artifacts than you think, as they have turned into various fragments, and either their powers are still sealed, hiding elsewhere, or they have been discovered by demons in advance, and imprisoned in demon land to prevent us from obtaining them. The priest softly said, The holy artifact fragments actually in the hands of people in Survivor Town are very few. It seems. Su Chi softly spoke. Our mission is to search for holy artifact fragments, then gather the strength to combat and strike into the demon nest to see what exactly is going on. Right? The middle-aged man nodded. Another thing to remind you of, there are likely many enemies who can use the holy artifact fragments because although demons can't use them, there will always be some people who directly side with Demon Town, becoming their driven slaves. Including the outsiders who have arrived these days, many have directly entered Demon Land.
Sui nodded.
And Luo Shinfu also pointed out with gravity at this moment. It seems that these are the abyssal cultists. Daozi, although what the priest told is only limited to this world, you and I, as well as many of the forces here, actually understand. Yes, Su Chi softly said, that demon land is fundamentally imbued with abyss power, and now the resistance has only just begun. His gaze turned to the priest. Do you know what the holy artifact fragments look like, sir? The priest nodded. Anthony has one. The man called Anthony slowly took off his bow, and flames gently emerged from the arrow. Above, the flames carried the intensity to exorcise and eliminate demons, yet did not harm Anthony in the slightest. Moreover, there was a projection-like ritual displayed, seeming to outline the original form of the fragment. Su Chi looked at the outline, his gaze turning strange. Why did it resemble a matchstick so much? Why did it look so much like the matchbox he had used to start the church fire? And Nan's expression was one of astonished amazement as he looked at the bow wreathed in blazing fire, using his spiritual energy to transmit his voice. Brother Su, did you see that? I'm not blind. Su Chi calmly averted his gaze because at that moment Anthony had also put away the flame-engulfed bow. The bow slowly returned to its ordinary appearance. Luo Shinfu also spoke softly. The strength on this is very advanced, different from spiritual energy. It indeed contains some bizarre power. Inscrutable to me. Inscrutable. Su Chi looked at the bow. You can't see through it, yet I can see it clearly. It was a match he had once used, and at present, it had somehow transformed into what was being called a fragment of a holy artifact. Moreover, he had seen clearly. Everything here seemed to be related to him, whether it be the events that had occurred, the sculptures, or those so-called holy artifacts. It was as if he had returned home. However, Su Chi did not seem overly pleased. His eyes held a profound depth that flickered. Others might not know, but he understood. It was impossible for him just to have the ability to turn stone into gold, to turn something casually used into a so-called holy artifact. It must be known, when he first entered the instance, he was simply an ordinary person. Even with the help of the exclamation mark, the price he paid to become the Abyss's most hated enemy was successful in obtaining the evil god's eye. But it should have been impossible for this kind of change to occur. It seems a lot has happened here. Why this place could become the prologue to the start of an extremely evil world, why it had gathered so many ancient space fragments, and why the world tree root was also buried here. He didn't believe that there was no one orchestrating all this. The various thoughts and ideas that Su Chi had before entering the temple were now quietly surfacing in his mind. To be honest, represented by the evil god, this was the endgame the Abyss faction planned for the Venerable. And there's still the very mysterious master of the present world, guiding people here with fate and the world tree leaf. The struggle between the two sides, the clash, was what endowed this place with such a grand scale. To become such top-notch behemoths, none could be simple characters. Each one was a seer of all things, a controller of destiny, a light flick of their fingers enough to trigger the lifelines of countless beings. And this strategy had spanned countless eons. Su Chi had reason to believe that it was just the beginning, and that he had long since been forced into the game. That so-called holy artifact, containing a mysterious power that even Luo Shinfu couldn't see through, was in reality something that Su Chi could sense. It was the white light that had sheltered people in the anxious land before. It was the strength of the supreme leader of God's palace, the master of the present world. And the sculpture in that church and the sculptures previously circulated about the despicable person were almost identical and probably leaked from here as well. As for whether the leaker was the evil god or another, Su Qi was somewhat uncertain. And if it was another, what then was their purpose? To make a sculpture of my image, and also guide by gods will so that countless people worship? Su Qi stroked his chin. Guys don't believe in coincidences, but he didn't jump to conclusions either. After all, the sculpture had no face, and it was not certain that either side knew who it was. It was just an excuse for opposition, a representation under the struggle of both sides. But no matter what, now, he had arrived. How you all have troubled me, Su Qi murmured to himself. After leaving the temple, everyone took a temporary rest, waiting for others to return. Su Qi and Nan, along with Rab and others, prepared for their next move. Now we have a clear understanding of the situation here. As I've said before, although on the surface it appears to be a demonic incursion and pollution, the essence of it is the struggle between the present world and the abyss. Luo Xinfu's voice echoed in Su Qi's mind. Of course, there's also a large portion of people who are disorganized, seeking opportunities within this chaos. Roughly, there are 3 factions. Su Qi, however, disagreed with Luo Xinfu's view. To be precise, there are 4 forces now. The traditional confrontation between the abyss and the present world, as well as a large number of chaotic forces, plus. Su Qi decisively added, the Hustlers sect. Luo Xinfu? I'm talking serious and you're talking crazy. He sighed. In the future, at least there's hope that the Hustlers sect will become a major power. But for now, let's proceed steadily. This isn't a joke. The visible forces are mere illusions. When things truly burst forth, could be apocalyptic. Su Qi shook his head. You don't understand. Their bursts cannot hide their decline. The Hustlers are primed to shine. Luo Xinfu. What a contrarian. He wanted to express his complaints, but didn't know where to begin. He could only sigh. So this the Hustlers sect has 5 people now? He only knew Nan was one, the others who deceived and tricked could only be considered connections, and there were those few companions mentioned by Su Qi before. But he had yet to meet them. Question mark. Su Qi. There are definitely more than 5 now, all right? Luo Xinfu. He was somewhat helpless but didn't continue the topic too much. After all, Luo Xinfu had watched Su Qi come all this way, and though he always spoke wildly, his actions were always resolute. Anyhow, we must get serious now. Since we're in the game, we have to avoid the various dangers and seize opportunities here that will allow the immortal path to flourish anew. Despite the dangers here, there was also a tremendous opportunity. Coupled with Luo Xinfu's guidance, there was no reason they couldn't obtain real resources that would make Daozi's and the future of the immortal path's journey much easier. I think so too, Su Qi nodded slightly. Next, it's time to prepare. Besides searching for the holy artifact, preparing for the impending burst of the prologue, and starting to gather members of the Hustlers sect, the Heavenly Destiny people and the Venerable probably had already begun on their own. The evil god was searching for a venerable who could bear its presence and descend upon this place. And the master of the present world. Su Qi murmured to himself, what will he do? Before leaving the anxious land, he had also visited room number 4, which contained a finger bone of the master of the present world. A single finger bone suppressed the entire anxious land. While its immense and terrifying strength was evident, it also indicated that the master of the present world was incomplete. He might not be able to do the same as the evil god. Su Qi gazed towards the distant church, slowly retracting his eyesight. Let's just see how it goes. Approximately 2 hours had passed. Those who had gone out had finally returned to Survivor Town before nightfall. There were teams who went to gather herbs and hunt pollution monsters, as well as those who explored various energy-laden stones or materials for crafting equipment. These were the town's own personnel configurations, meant to fulfill the daily lives of the survivors, as well as to strengthen the other inhabitants, so they could survive in this world, preparing to collect holy artifacts and assault the demon nest. At the same time, there were other teams, about 100 people, who were adventurers like Rab and Lu Fan. However, although there are many adventurers, it's obvious that there are different groups, Rab said softly. There are all sorts here, each with their own interests. It's complicated, which is also why we two ended up alone. Of course, Lu Fan patted Annan's shoulder. That's also why, upon seeing you two on your own, brother N, we took the initiative to talk. Annan was getting on well with them. He was now quite the chatterbox. After all, this was his first visit to the present world after countless years, his first interaction with other people. Su Chi had not stopped him. Under the influence of the other demigods, Annan's qualities were first-rate, so he naturally knew how to interact with newly acquainted people. He was now using the Holy Light Mark to get in touch with T0 and was communicating with Old Huang. At this moment, they were at the other end of the world, a considerable distance away, and meeting up was not so simple. This world was about the same size as the reality within which Su Chi himself lived. After all, this was the first instance he had entered, so generally speaking, new players were given worlds of similar size. And now Old Huang was far from him on another hemisphere. Considering the size of the world and the distribution of survivor towns, it would be a bit troublesome to gather together. After all, there were no planes, trains, or ships, and most importantly, the mist was full of pollution monsters, fraught with all sorts of dangers. From time to time, there were even the presences of low-level demons. Crossing a hemisphere to meet was indeed not so simple. At this moment, the sky had slowly darkened, and the church faintly glimmered with the pure white light, illuminating this patch of darkness. Why does the night feel so dangerous? Everyone has returned. Annan asked this question. Do the monsters become more powerful? Lu Fan shook his head. That's not quite it. It's not related to the night. It's just that during this time, demons from the demon land start to move around, seemingly arranging some rituals. The sky dome turns a deep dark red, and it's safer not to leave at night. However, it won't last long. Once the dark red disappears, we can start taking action. The dark red color, as he mentioned, did not last long. Just 2 hours later, the dark red gradually faded away. Su Chi looked into the distance. Mr. Luo, can you tell what this ritual is for? How could I possibly tell? Luo Shinfu gently shook his head. But didn't you say before that the entire land of extreme evil is laid out with these dark red rituals? Whatever therefore, they must have a significant connection to its core. Listening to your words is as good as listening to a wise saying. It was normal. After all, there wasn't much information available yet. Previously, in the mechanical world where Bai Qixing resided, he had seen the leader, Sirius, reach a secret agreement with a giant demon eye, and there was that astonishing blood ritual that allowed many mechanical life to successfully leave the place. Not to mention the dark red ritual that had spread to the entire land of extreme evil. Su Chi was indeed quite curious to see what the demons were up to. The dark red had faded away, and the 4 of them were standing at the exit of the town. Let's go, we're setting off. The other teams had only rested for a while and were also ready to start at this moment. They had just entered the town to avoid that particular time period. Is this our equipment? In Annan's hand was an object similar to a radiation detector, with a needle on it. It can detect the degree of pollution. The higher the pollution level, the closer we are to a powerful pollution source. Lu Fan said, of course, it's not clear whether it's the necessary energy, resources, or dangerous monsters we'll encounter. Annan nodded. So there's both danger and opportunity. Additionally, Rab said softly, it can also detect holy artifacts, but only when very close to them. Although the fog outside the town looked thick, once inside, visibility was actually quite good. Even at night, light wasn't an issue for them. But as soon as they stepped into the fog, Annan shivered. Even Lu Fan, Rab, and members of other teams revealed a degree of discomfort. It was as if there were whispers in their ears, an uncontrollable sense of panic from behind gnawing at them. Someone cursed, no matter how many times I enter this place, I can't help but feel panicked. A person beside spoke gravely. This is the power of pollution, an influence on the mind. Others laughed. It's just pollution fog. We've seen it outside before. A young man spoke calmly. Pollution is a common existence in the present world. But the more common something is, the more deceptively complex. To become a core power of the abyss, even the most common must also be the most terrifying. Su Qi took an extra glance at the young man. This young man had good judgment. Pollution was indeed the core power of the evil god, causing the entire present world to be invaded with no recourse. However, as soon as he stepped in here, that feeling returned. Too familiar. Before, it felt like coming home, but now it could be confirmed. Truly home. Anything related to spiritual pollution simply wasn't a problem. At this moment, countless people across the world were also taking action, dependent on various survivor towns. Moving through the fog, gathering various resources was not their main purpose. Now, everyone's main goal was to find holy artifacts, including the masses in Demon Land, the Venerable of the Abyss, the forces aligned with the Abyss Camp, and other outsiders. All were in Demon Land. They looked at the terrifying postures of the demons, their eyes wary yet fervent, knowing they stood on the side of the powerful. Let's go. We also begin searching for holy artifact fragments. The slaughter is about to start. But we hold an absolute advantage. Undercurrents were already surging. Across the globe, in the cold north and south, the desolate Gobi deserts, the stormy, isolated islands at sea, people began to prepare, take action, search step by step. Even the survivor towns were following suit. After all, with many outsiders coming here this time, they too saw hope. And at this very moment, in the church, the figure of the priest stood beneath the sculpture, praying with devotion. After the prayer, he slowly opened his eyes and murmured, "Lord, the Savior you mentioned 3 years ago, will they appear this time?" Under the gloomy sky, there was only silence. The pale light of the Phantom Grove shone on the abandoned grounds of the city, covering the ruins that no one tended to, surrounded by dilapidated vehicles and street lamps broken in half. Dozens of pollution monsters roamed these worn streets, their appearances bizarre, not merely zombies, but rather forms that would assault one's spirit at a glance. Meanwhile, boom! Loud footsteps broke the silence. A tall figure strode alongside the ruined buildings, with bronze-colored skin and a bald head covered in spikes. Wearing a short coat, he held a string of prayer beads in his hand. Its appearance also led a group of pollution monsters. At that very moment, Su Qi and 3 others were on an abandoned tower a kilometer away, watching the scene. "What is that?" Anan said, somewhat surprised. "We call it Ghost Soul. It's a common type of low-level demon. It's summoned en masse from the Demon Land. It is said." Rab lowered his voice. The true form behind the Ghost Soul, tall as a mountain, with soul-capturing golden skin, is one of the 7 great demons. From what Rab and the others said, they knew that there were levels for demons in this world. The low-level demon before them was the Ghost Soul and the previously repelled giant. Some were gigantic, and while different in shape from people, unlike pollution monsters, they could use spiritual energy to fight and contain demon bloodlines. Of course, like pollution monsters, they lacked intelligence, only harboring desires for madness, destruction, bloodlust, and more. Moving up were the middle high rank, and Lu Fan took out the pollution detection device. However, it looks like the area where it is located has a very high pollution value. They had followed this direction with the help of the pollution detection device. This was their only compass outside the small town. According to the experience of the townspeople, the higher the pollution value, the higher the possibility of holy artifact fragments existing. Of course, there are detections of holy artifact fragments, but they are impossible to retrieve, resulting in many pollution monsters and low-level demons guarding this place. Rab guessed with his deductions. All in all, this place is great. High pollution value means opportunities and risks coexist, and there might be some good things. Su Qi looked into the distance. Pollution value was indeed linked to valuable items because often, only valuable items would be polluted yet not dissipate. And there were no shortages of ancient items here, as according to the town's residents, every month, the entire world would burst into various upheavals, like volcanic eruptions, with stones flying everywhere.
Sui predicted.
This might be because this place was the core land, and coupled with the previous sighting of demon eye leading to other gate worlds, and dark red rituals pervading every direction, the presence of various spatial rifts from the outer realms wasn't surprising. Having large amounts of ancient items drawn here was also expected, and more so, given the extraordinary nature of this location, truly unimaginable items might be drawn in. Let's go. The four of them were ready to take action. Su Qi followed along, but he was multitasking, preparing for battle here, chatting with Luo Xinfu, watching data provided by Xiao Meng, and also maintaining contact with Old Huang. Come on, let's deal with it directly. Their actions were decisive, not hesitating or dragging their feet. They started the battle. After all, everyone was an adventurer from the present world, having seen various worlds fall into pollution. They knew they had to fight quickly and decisively to avoid attracting nearby creatures, which could complicate matters. And they were no ordinary people. Anyone who could enter here had strength that stood out in the 7th rank. Rab and Lu Fan burst forth, destroying all nearby pollution monsters instantly, even though there were sharp screams and strange spiritual fluctuations coming from the monsters. But that was not enough for them. And Nan was even more fierce. Now that he finally had a chance to show his skills, he naturally needed to vent. Su Qi, as always, was slacking off. It was just a low-level demon after all. If they could not handle it, they genuinely shouldn't bother. As they got closer, they realized the ghost soul's eyes were blind, tightly shut, and it also made sounds, like mumbling or painfully screeching. Spiritual pollution utilized the sounds as a medium, causing a slight delay for the three of them, but it did not affect them too much. Boom, boom, boom. The four's power burst forth, their body's spiritual energy functioning like bulldozer engines. They didn't even need to use abilities to stand up to a giant like the ghost soul. At this moment, although the ghost soul was at a disadvantage, its body was a demon's, and even at low level it possessed amazing defensive power. The heavy attacks thundered against it, only causing it to whimper softly. What is it muttering? Can't make it out. Let's kill it first. Their figures burst forth rapidly, striking fiercely without hesitation, hitting its lethal spots from all angles. Su Qi also summoned Rui, the red flying shuttle bursting with flashes as it attacked. But he didn't go all out. After all, such a demon was just a minor issue, and killing it too quickly would ruin his teammates' experience. Not to mention he hadn't collected all the information he wanted yet. What was more important was that Su Qi always felt as if he was being watched. It wasn't to say that he was being monitored directly, but within the sky dome, in places unseen, there seemed to be something like radar sweeping around. This feeling made Su Qi feel uneasy, and his intuition told him not to rashly reveal his powers and be detected. Moreover, this place itself had an acquaintance that was the killing demons from that small town. At this moment, with a loud bang, the ghost soul demon was repelled by the attacks of the four people. It smashed through several buildings violently and fell heavily to the ground, with debris flying and blood and flesh scattering everywhere. A low-level demon naturally could not withstand the assault of the four people. And at this time, the ghost soul kept rolling on the ground as if undergoing some kind of agony, struggling wildly, rolling back and forth, with every movement causing the ground to shake. And it started muttering again. This time, everyone could hear its words. Its lips trembled as if it were experiencing unbearable pain at this moment, and there was endless rage, with a hoarse and pained voice mechanically spitting out words one by one from its throat. Stop burning! Stop burning! Stop burning! And Nan and the others frowned deeply. Su Qi, on the other hand, raised his eyebrows. Who disturbed it? And at this time, the ghost soul suddenly let out a roar, and from several blood holes pierced by the attacks, flames surprisingly started to emerge. Damn! It's really burning up, and Nan exclaimed in shock. At this moment, the ghost soul let out a mournful scream, then violently lunged toward the people. It's you. It definitely is you. You've come back. We've all been waiting for you. We must have revenge. Revenge. The ghost soul, engulfed in raging flames, with its harsh, pained nonsense, charged straight at them, feeling agony. Yet even more so madness and fury. What does it mean? Who is it looking for revenge on? And Nan was somewhat uncertain, but immediately got ready for battle. Don't go. Scatter and dodge. It's going to self-destruct. Rab said gravely, speaking very quickly. I had heard before, when they are about to be killed, every ghost soul will say the same words, and flames will emerge from its body, leading to self-destruction. That flame is terrifying. If it touches you, it can even burn away spiritual energy. It can easily scorch skin and burst flesh. Everyone immediately dispersed to dodge. As the ghost soul looked towards the four people's different directions, without any hesitation, it charged in Su Chi's direction. Raging flames approached with a roaring sound, moving fast. You sure are spot on with your target, Su Chi said oddly, watching it charge over. As soon as it spoke, he found it somewhat hard to keep his composure. It was too similar. Wasn't this exactly how those killing demons looked when he set the church on fire? It was hard not to make the connection. And it was quickly approaching, with terrifying flames bursting forth on Su Chi. It had to be said the power was truly significant. The fire roared into the sky, and the explosive spread caused everything within 50 meters to be leveled to the ground. And it continued to form a raging sea of fire that lasted for a long time. Seeing this scene, Luo Shinfu's expression tightened, and he warned, Daozi, be careful. They're right. This isn't an ordinary flame. It has the trait of being unquenchable. Like a persistent parasite, it's troublesome if it latches on. Is that so? Su Chi watched as the flames seemed to be approaching him. But when they got close, they inexplicably veered away. Luo Shinfu looked at this scene, slightly bewildered. At that moment,
Brother Su.
And Nan was quick to offer support. I'm coming to save you. Yet Su Chi's calm voice emerged. No need. He simply dusted off his clothes and stepped out of the flames. I have special equipment, a fire avoidance shield. Having targeted items like that is indeed good. Lu Fan and the others approached. From this it seems, Brother Su at least won't be overwhelmed when facing ghost soul types of demons. And Nan also nodded. Brother Su, it's good that you're all right. Luo Shinfu, are you all out of your minds? Who saw any fire avoidance shield on him? Usually, when items are used, there would be fluctuations of spiritual energy. Don't you use your brains? Only he himself had clearly seen. Those flames completely avoided Su Chi. Daozi, what on earth is going on? Why did those flames avoid you? And what was that about revenge just now? He could tell those flames were advanced. Similar flames exist in the Immortal Path dimension, but their ability to burn spiritual energy made their attributes quite special indeed. How would I know? Su Chi paused. Didn't you hear what they just said? That's the standard line for every ghost soul type of demon like this one. And Nan looked at the two and couldn't help but say, You just mentioned, these ghost souls are mere products created by one of the 7 great demons, based on its essence, right? They nodded. These ghost souls were numerous, often leading pollution monsters like we just saw, claiming a territory for themselves. And Nan said, So are there other products that were created by the 7 great demons based on themselves? And what exactly are these 7 great demons? Rab had a hint of fear in his expression and seemed about to speak. Lu Fan, however, raised his hand. Don't rush to talk about it here. First, let's go retrieve something. The commotion earlier was not small. We must leave before other monsters or people arrive. The 4 arrived at the location previously guarded by the ghost soul, which was a collapsed pit. Inside the pit was a damaged and broken doll, still with a smile on its face. Though it looked like an ordinary toy, That smile on the doll simultaneously sent chills down their spines. Quite creepy, Anan muttered. It's not just creepy. It has absorbed a great amount of pollution and has already transformed into a powerful pollutant. Using it comes with a mental cost, said Rab softly. Is that so? Anan was curious. Many powerful ancient items that emerge here are transformed into pollutants. Didn't you know? Lu Fan looked at Anan with some surprise. In fact, from the conversations they had while getting to know each other, he had noticed that these two were different from ordinary people. Although Anan had various qualities and a refined demeanor, he spoke differently from the adventurers of the present world, and the things known in this world, Anan seemed to know only half. And as for Su Qi, he was even more different, often mentioning things they were unaware of. Though these things were all jests, his way of thinking was not like ordinary people's. Sorry, after all, we too come from a native world and don't know much about the present world, said Su Qi, without a blush on his face or skip in his heartbeat. That's all right, to fight your way from the native world to here is already very impressive. Moreover, your abilities are much stronger than ordinary adventurers. Rab spoke admirably. And Nan? Brother Su lies as smoothly as a flowing river. What could he say? He could only agree. Let's go. Lu Fan stood up. And Nan was surprised. Aren't you taking this item? Rab also stood up, shaking his head. This pollutant has an extraordinary contaminated spiritual power. Without a special focus on cultivating spiritual power, one simply cannot take it, not even get close. This is also one of the reasons why many things appear, yet can only be guarded and not taken. So we just give up? No, Lu Fan said. If we gather enough resources to resist the pollution, we could try. Unfortunately, we have already expended the resources we had gathered, and since it's your first time, so... He suddenly fell silent, because a figure had already started moving towards the pit. Brother Su. Anan was startled. Rab and Lu Fan's expressions changed drastically. Oh no! He's been influenced by the doll. Bad, bad, bad. Lu Fan and Rab's faces turned grave. How could he be so easily influenced? Pollutants of this eerie type generally possess terrifying powers to hypnotically influence others. Just one misstep and you could be affected, controlled. They had been on full alert at every moment, yet they had not anticipated that the guy would fall victim so easily. Is his spiritual power that weak? Anan replied, I have no idea, but on second thought, Brother Su had never used any spiritual abilities or strength before in the previous Gate world. It seemed that Brother Su was not adept in spiritual power. In fact, it could be said to be weak. This made sense upon reflection. No one is perfect. If Brother Su was monstrous in other areas, it was reasonable for his spiritual power to be weaker. He. At this moment, the doll's face grew increasingly horror-stricken with a ghastly grin, and even a strange, piercing laughter began ringing in their ears. Ripples even started to emerge. Waves of terrifying black fog, shimmering with a twisted radiance, began descending around them. At the same time, their detection equipment also trembled non-stop. For the sake of stealth, the detection equipment generally had subtle tremors, just enough to alert themselves, since there were so many ability users with probe-type powers, extremely sensitive to movements around them. But right now, the shaking of the detection equipment was so noticeable that all three of them could hear it. Upon inspection, 15,000 pollution points. The two of them looked at the device, their faces growing even more troubled. Before coming here, the detected data had been merely a little over 4,000. We've been fooled. The spiritual strength it's showing now far exceeds what we just detected. I told you before, the pollution points we detect from these pollutants are not necessarily indicative of their true strength. They wanted to escape, but found themselves trapped. They were surrounded by dense, twisted black fog on all sides. He. The doll's laughter grew more piercing, and the entire pit began to change as massive amounts of blood surged up. Rising like a crazed swamp, they couldn't escape, so they tried to resist. They furiously activated their spiritual energy, using their abilities. but it was like punching a non-Newtonian fluid. The bloodied swamp couldn't be blown apart. Instead, it glued them in place, their limbs sinking further down. The three were submerged. At the same time, the horrific stench of blood and the feeling of countless bodies having been devoured by the blood swamp emerged in their minds. And, die, die, die. Its voice echoed in everyone's minds. I'm going to turn you all into dolls. Pretty, pretty dolls. The three offered no response, for as soon as they opened their mouths they were flooded with blood. They could only struggle frantically in the blood swamp, but the more they struggled, the more hopeless it became. With all their strength, they were unable to employ it effectively, and the blood-sucking insects, like tiny worms, began crawling thickly over their bodies. From their eyes, from their ears, from their noses, they burrowed into every orifice. They watched as insect after insect wriggled inside their skin, their fear cascading down like a collapsing dam, violently rushing back against their hearts, leaving them breathless. Such was the horror of spiritual abilities. Meanwhile, the doll watched the spectacle with its hee-hee insane laughter. There was no blood swamp to speak of, no horde of terrifying insects. Couldn't even move. But the spiritual pollution domain it had just unleashed was killing without form or trace. The three were actually choking themselves, rolling in the muddy ground by the pit, their unleashed abilities blasting elsewhere. As for the other person, the doll watched with its ghastly giggle, as just a slight influence had apparently caused him to mentally break down, motionless. A mental breakdown meant there was no need to experience the terrifying spiritual pollution like the other three, tormented by their own domains. Quite unexciting. But now it was time to end this. It now had full control. It even stopped its cackling laughter, and that perpetually smiling face began to move slowly. And then it sat up directly. These idiots, thinking I'm just an ordinary object or pollutant, all because of the doll's appearance, always fools people. It moved its body, which was not a pollutant at that moment, but a living being. It looked at the four, devouring the power of imagination from these four. I am another step closer to unlocking the treasure of the fantasy dimension. Although it wore a smile, in the next moment, the entire doll's body opened up, revealing an abundance of fluffy strands inside. It was a doll. While it had a shell on the outside, it was stitched together on the inside, and there was also a gem, flickering with light, inside which contained various fantastical images. It seemed to be the power of imagination it referred to. This was its most crucial source of strength. It carefully probed the surroundings with spiritual ripples one more time, ensuring there were no other threats, before it began to act. After all, if it were to devour someone else's power of imagination, it would be in a vulnerable and unguarded state, and exposing the fantasy stone would also entail risks. After all, with the fantasy stone taken, its life would be in someone else's hands. That was the biggest weakness of these fantasy beings. It raised its hand, the stone shining brightly, as four golden threads extended towards the four people. The next moment, images of all sorts appeared above everyone's heads, visions of wild and boundless imaginations that had once been fantasized in the mind. And it was starting to prepare for absorption. This was its unique ability. There was no need for spiritual energy, nor was there a need for others' lives, only the power of imagination from others. Of course, once it deprived someone of their imagination, they would lose that fragment of memory, and it wouldn't have to worry about being hunted or wanted. That was also an important reason why it had been able to slip by unnoticed from a distant place, blend into the extreme evil city, the dark zone, and arrive here. Not a single major figure had taken note of it. Perfect. However, it suddenly paused because those four golden threads were connected to Su Chi, but the images appearing above his head were different from the other three individuals, entirely different from what it had absorbed from others along the way. It was a screen of falling snowflakes. For the first time it encountered such a situation, it bit down on its teeth slightly and began to exert strength. And the next moment, the snowflake screen finally began to show changes. It had just revealed a smile. However, it suddenly froze because, The image that appeared was a strange black and white picture with nothing else in it. Only a terrifyingly huge silhouette was starting to emerge within. What is this? It was somewhat puzzled, wanting to see more clearly. Although it was a fantasy, generally speaking, it should have a strong correlation with what the person had seen and heard. It wasn't possible to create something out of nothing, something with no origin, no memory. That was the limit of cognition. However, the more it looked, for some reason, a strong sense of unease suddenly enveloped its mind, as if continuing to look would result in it being devoured by the black and white. But it didn't stop. It was just an illusion after all, a completely virtual memory. It didn't think such things could pose any harm to itself. But the next moment, a voice softly rang out. "Are you sure you want to keep looking?" Su Qi's face, with a hint of a smile, appeared in its somewhat widened eyes. "If you keep looking, you're going to break down." It stared at Su Qi in shock. Why had this guy in front of them come to his senses? It also immediately realized, without any hesitation, that it retracted the golden threads, ready to close the body it had just opened. As long as it closed, the fantasy stone could be hidden in any place others couldn't think of. As long as the fantasy stone remained intact, its existence would continue. Su Qi, however, wasn't in a hurry to reach out. He smiled as he watched it draw back the golden threads defensively, seemingly not noticing the nanoscale chip and the tiny sparks, the size of a cell, left behind on the threads. It quickly closed its body, concealing the fantasy stone. And it no longer pretended to be a doll laden with pollutants, but stared intensely at Su Qi, unleashing an even stronger spiritual power. It even directly transformed the blood swamp to surge towards Su Qi. Yet, Su Qi simply watched this scene with a calm smile. "Stop pretending to spread pollutants. Your little tricks aren't even comparable to mine." His pupils flickered slightly. The next moment, as the doll watched in shock, it witnessed a towering blood sea, the boundless black and white of the old days, and a multitude of horrifying and unnatural black shadows. Its strongest spiritual domain crumbled in an instant. The three individuals trembled, one after another fainting away, but fortunately, they were liberated from the domain. The doll trembled uncontrollably, its body beginning to burst at every intact place, unraveling inch by inch. With a muffled groan, the power of imagination on its body suddenly burst forth, allowing itself also to break free from the illusion it had just experienced. But even so, its gaze toward Su Qi was filled with shock and fear. "You possess such a terrifying spirit illusion. You are the deceitful and incomparable spiritual sequencer," Su Qi said with a faint smile. "Although I don't know how the various domains are divided later, I'm definitely not a cunning spiritual sequencer whom everyone praises as a good person." Before Su Qi could finish, the doll suddenly burst forth with the terrifying radiant light gun, shooting towards Su Qi with piercing momentum. But its body turned and ran away, running incredibly fast. "How rude," Su Qi muttered to himself. "I've been standing here letting you have a blast for half the day, and you run away as I speak. That won't do." Su Qi raised his hand and directly smashed the radiant light gun that had been conjured by spiritual power. Its spiritual power could create spirit illusions and kill visions. The former were hallucinations, while the latter had physical form. When attacked, one would genuinely be hurt. The next moment, Su Qi's body disappeared on the spot and reappeared right in front of the fleeing doll, grabbing it with one hand. "Well, I must say, although it has short legs, it runs pretty fast." The doll was struggling, but it couldn't move at all. The strength of its body was simply not enough to resist. However, it gave up and cursed furiously. "You cunning, despicable wretch. If you have the guts, just kill me." It didn't beg for mercy. Instead, it began to attack. Su Qi said indifferently, all right, cut the act. Your words are still mixed with spiritual power, trying to provoke my killing intent, to tear you apart, and then you're going to pretend to be killed and sneak away quietly." The color drained slightly from the doll's face, and its voice faltered. "I saw everything that just happened," said Su Qi gently. That stone is your core. Unless it's destroyed, you can't die. The doll was cursing and swearing inside. Damn it. All the sneaking around for over a decade, and nobody had noticed, but to think that it would slip up here. It gave up pretending and laughed out loud. So what if you know? Do you really think you can find my core? And I'm not afraid to tell you. I'm already using the power of the core to initiate the transfer ritual. In just 2 minutes, I will be able to leave. You just sit here gaping. Now that the other party knew many of its secrets, why not just tell him the rest? The strength of its fantasy stone, though it was its lifeline, lay in its stealth, silent and unnoticed. Not bad for a creature from the fantasy dimension, Suchi said calmly. You do have a rather dramatic way of speaking. From the start, he had realized that this doll was not a pollutant. It came from the fantasy dimension, and after a brief exchange with Mr. Luo, he knew the traits of fantasy beings, numerous but extremely good at camouflage and hiding. However, it seemed their fantasy country also had big problems. Apparently, it was completely inaccessible, entirely sealed off. Thus, the fantasy beings stranded outside were incredibly rare. So what? The doll said, seeing Suchi looking around and even making faces. Stop looking. Stop looking. You guys lack imagination. You won't find it. Are you getting anxious? Time's running out. Suchi stroked his chin. So confident. He stretched out his hand, his thumb and forefinger forming a circle, and moved it left and right. Then he stopped, aiming at a distant point in the sky dome. Though the dome was a dark red with thick clouds, there was a twinkling light within. Getting nervous, eh? It was still blustering about escaping, its voice suddenly dropping. Because, without even approaching, Suchi simply reached out and plucked the twinkling light. A small gem appeared between his fingers, still twinkling, the source of the light being the starfire he had left earlier. He had predicted all of this beforehand. So this is your method of hiding, Suchi said with a smile. Not bad, quite interesting. No wonder you were so sure of yourself just now. The doll was now speechless, its whole body beginning to tremble. The next moment, it lunged towards the object in Suchi's hand. Suchi simply stepped to the side, tossing it into his holy light corridor room, and said with a smile, All right, I've got things to do and so do you. Let's each go our separate ways, until we meet again, if destiny allows. The doll's body trembled, its eyes wide as it watched Suchi turn and leave. It suddenly leapt forward, grabbing onto Suchi's clothes. Bro. Big bro. I was wrong. I really was. Give it back to me. Without it, I can't survive. Suchi remained unmoved, and almost let out a laugh. The little fellow from fantasy country, to be honest, was still somewhat naive. At this very moment, with snotty nose and teary eyes, begging for mercy. It genuinely took him by surprise. In the cruel present world, when it really came down to a life-or-death moment, it was nothing but deception and absolute fatality. Thinking that begging for mercy would make the other party spare you? Indeed, it was from the fantasy dimension, far too capable of fantasy. When he thought about it like that, most of the lives from fantasy country were adept at hiding and disguising themselves, which made sense, since their underlying nature disliked deception and they avoided contact with others. It seems you're still too inexperienced. Let me give you a lesson in present-world adventure rules. Suchi smiled lightly. Sympathy is the most unreliable of words. When you need something from someone else, you should remember one thing: nothing is free, especially not your life. Without paying the expected price, you can't easily get it back. It gritted its teeth, also realizing this point. It shouted out loud, If you return it to me, then I'll tell you a method to obtain a great holy artifact here. Suchi's expression remained calm as he muttered to himself, The method for a holy artifact doesn't sound so tempting. But the doll wasn't disheartened. Instead, it confidently looked at Suchi. Trust me, this isn't just an ordinary holy artifact fragment, but one of the carved 3 holy artifacts: the shotgun, the axe, the cleaver. It's a complete holy artifact. Definitely worth much more than my fantasy stone. Suchi stroked his chin. Don't belittle yourself. I think you have infinite potential, far exceeding the ordinary. It widened its eyes. Don't. The importance of a holy artifact is much greater than you think. Then why don't you tell me about the importance of the holy artifact? Although he knew that holy artifacts were some of the items he had encountered that had been transformed by some power, aside from increasing strength and having a repressive power against demons, he was unaware of any other uses. First off, the doll raised its head to glance at Su Qi. Since you're an outsider, you should know that this place is not as simple as you imagine. Behind this is the confrontation between the abyss and the present world, and unpredictable, terrifying incidents are bound to happen. This was almost not a secret anymore, as most adventurers had such an awareness of what the extremely evil world was like, and what they had encountered all along the way. Everyone knew what was in the gate world and were aware of the torrent within. Minor characters like you and I have no right to be involved. We can only seek a few scraps during the outburst of the torrent at the periphery. The doll looked at Su Qi's thoughtful expression, the corners of its mouth raising in a slight, self-satisfied curve, knowing it had struck a chord. After all, most adventurers were similar, although it had grand aspirations unlike them. But that didn't prevent it from having lots of knowledge. After all, the power of imagination it absorbed carried many people's memories, knowing everyone's fantasies, which usually included their deep-seated desires. And then, Su Qi said softly, "What does this have to do with the 3 holy artifacts?" "Of course it does, because—" the doll muttered mysteriously and hoarsely. "As far as I know, that sculpture is the despicable person wanted by the abyss." At the mention of these 4 words, Su Qi slightly raised an eyebrow imperceptibly, but his expression remained unchanged. The doll seemed very knowledgeable about this matter. Rumors have it that when the 3 holy artifacts come together, the despicable person's true form will appear. And the abyss is also searching for the holy artifacts. The present world is likewise countering the abyss, doing the same, and even both sides have issued extremely high resources on the universal bounty list. Su Qi narrowed his eyes slightly and secretly opened the universal bounty list. He hadn't looked at the universal bounty list for a while. On the extraordinary list, with various beings from the old days recovering, and a multitude of forces, divine race emerging, the despicable person's ranking had actually dropped to beyond 100. But now, opening it now, well, look at that. Su Qi silently said to himself. It really topped the list. This time the despicable person's name rose straight from the 100th place right to the first, and the resources behind it were overwhelmingly surpassing the second. You should know, when the despicable person first appeared, the highest ranking was in the top 10, suppressed by the Spirit King. Now, one look and it's clear there have been a lot of resources put on bounty. He had actually failed to notice. Sure enough, he had become a bit lax. But this was also normal since he had been roaming around the old world before. The doll saw Su Qi frowning, thinking that he must be moved by the resources listed on the bounty, as their value was too high, even including demigod items as stakes. It confidently said, "And what I am going to tell you is exactly the location of one of the 3 holy artifacts, as well as the method to obtain it." But Su Qi did not ask immediately. Instead he lightly said, "If you know, why don't you get it yourself?" The doll shrugged. "Once such a holy artifact emerges, carrying it openly will make it impossible to hide. If exposed, I would inevitably attract covetousness. All sorts of hunting and killing. I really don't want to take that risk. So, I can tell you, and after you get it, if you are scared and dare not use it for yourself, just use the universal sequence list to exchange it for the despicable person's bounty. Both the present world and the abyss have put up legendary objects on offer. You choose one side to give it to, and then you'll have no worries behind you." The bounty board also featured functions similar to bidding or auctioning. After all, some items are inevitably sought after by many, and there's no need to worry about exposure, as the universal bounty list has special rules and methods to allow anonymous exchanges. Su Qi had yet to experience this method, but it was said to require an exorbitant amount of spirit coins and was classified as an advanced ability. It involved space or dimensions, though which exactly was not currently known, But in any case, the universal bounty list was not simple. It was, after all, a power from the present world with a high probability of being one of the core abilities. Why say this? Because Su Qi already had a lot of understanding of the core. Su Qi had encountered two others, the Immortal Path Steel and the Heart of Divine Weapon, which had no consciousness, meaning that to use their true powers, someone had to develop them. The present world was the same. Not just the universal bounty list, but also the current restrictions on the sequence path in the present world, the suppression of sequence 2 and higher, and other rules seem to have been developed by the so-called master of the present world. Do you see? With this, can I get my fantasy stone back? The doll asked Su Qi, hopeful. Of course, but I need to get my hands on it first, Su Qi said as he picked up the doll and placed it in his pocket. You'll follow me for now. Being picked up, the doll could not muster any resistance, only looking at Su Qi with a pitiful expression. After you get it, will you really return it to me? Of course, who do you think I, Su Buxian, am? I'm the good guy known far and wide in the present world, and honesty is my trademark. My word is as good as gold. The doll nodded, half believing and half doubting. Meanwhile, Luo Xinfu, who had been silently observing this scene from the beginning, fell silent, because he knew, poor child, about to fall into the clutches of evil. However, it's unexpected that an entity like the evil god would search on such a grand scale for the one called despicable person. Luo Xinfu's voice echoed in his mind. In my view, this despicable person must be some great figure, at the very least a divine-level existence. Su Qi responded casually without a change in expression. Who knows? It might just be some low-level sequencer unknown to fame, perhaps just another adventurer who entered this place. Luo Xinfu shook his head. How can that be? He did not take Su Qi's joke seriously. By the way, Daozi, the ring he was in shimmered with light. I've recently regained some strength and have retrieved an object formerly known as the 8 Diagrams Plate. It can reveal auspicious and ominous omens, helping you to seek good fortune and avoid disaster. Is that so? Su Qi paused. Can it predict the fortune or misfortune of my dealings with the despicable person? Luo Xinfu hesitated for a moment but did not refuse. Although the 8 Diagrams Plate could only be used once a day, there was no pressing matter at hand. And the next moment, Luo Xinfu became grave. I advise you, Daozi, to stay away from this matter. Take the holy artifact, exchange it for resources, and then vanish. Don't entangle yourself too much with the despicable person. What do you mean? The omen indicates extreme bad luck. Anyone involved with the despicable person will find themselves in the most terrible danger. Life or death is unpredictable. Don't tell. Seriously, don't tell. This artifact is indeed divine and quite accurate. Don't worry. We don't even know who the despicable person is right now. Su Qi casually waved his hand. How does it relate to us? Luo Xinfu also breathed a sigh of relief. That's true. There's no connection, no need for unnecessary worry. At this moment, Su Qi had arrived at the pit's edge and woke the 3 people. They woke up like they had a nightmare, pale-faced. Upon learning that the pollutant had vanished without a trace, they all breathed a sigh of relief, grateful to have survived. Afterward, naturally, they would not turn back. Their current gains were not substantial, and if they needed a place to stay, they could simply move to the next survivor town, without any reason to return. And Su Qi naturally planned to do the same. Ordinary holy artifact fragments were for others to collect. They didn't hold much attraction for him. And the whole world centered around the Demon Land, with the closer proximity to the Demon Land indicating greater danger and more essential areas. The survivor town they had just left was far from this point. Those with real power and backgrounds had undoubtedly already rushed to the towns near the Demon Land. After all, that was the real front line, where resources outside, monsters, and treasures far exceeded other places, including the towns where the inhabitants were likely all top-tier combat personnel. This was why in the previous town Su Qi had seen, approximately 100 people had no one with any significant background appearing. They continued to move forward and explore. The doll also provided guidance in direction, pointing them towards the vicinity of the Demon Land, which they could gradually approach. The fog in the sky dome was rather thick, a dark red oppressive atmosphere making it hard to breathe. Bai Yilin raised his head. What a terrifying world! He stood alone in a polluted boundary, being part of the first group to arrive in this world. He was now in one of the frontline towns surrounding the Demon Land. No, this should not be called a town, but rather a city of barriers. This was the truly frightening place. Low-level demons were seen everywhere, a mid-level demon per kilometer, their massive bodies and bizarre monsters looming like mountains in the distance. Of course, the 10 cities of barriers also gathered various strong figures, the Heaven's chosen sons. They had also watched a great number of forces settle into the Demon Land. The current situation was nowhere near as simple as it appeared on the surface, with various forces entering and swiftly establishing a foothold, forming a hierarchy that was impenetrable to ordinary people. Ordinary people had no place here. Almost a week has passed. Various massive forces are here vying for the future, and they're monopolizing it. Bai Yilin sighed lightly. He, Jiang Ji, and the 100 members of the Meteor Alliance could only scatter to secure some resources. As for Mr. Nancy, ever since his arrival, he had not met with Mr. Nancy again. Mr. Nancy must have gone to gather with the Heavenly Destiny people, who now stood behind the present world, ready to confront the abyss and lead such a massive tide. They could not participate, nor did they have the right to. Similarly, the City of Barriers had also become one side of the chaotic camp, overrun by various powers, races from the boundaries, and so on. Bai Yilin walked into the city streets, where a large number of forces were already stationed, turning it into a second extreme evil city. As for the original inhabitants, the control had already been stripped away. Even the elimination of demons depended on the mood of the various forces. Although Bai Yilin had anticipated this situation, knowing what Mr. Nancy had said about no ordinary person being able to associate with the nobility, seeing many divine sons and numerous heavens chosen sons move among them, he still clenched his fists, unwilling to become just an ordinary person. Perched on his shoulder was Shandian, which transformed into a palm-sized mechanical puppy, its electronic eyes rotating. This city now likely has a population of about 1 million, with less than 1/10 being natives, innumerable constant star-level powers, galaxy-level powers nearing 1,000, and close to 10,000 from various powerful races, not to mention there are 9 other cities like this. Shandian had always been traveling with them, actively collecting information and assisting them in various ways. It's becoming more and more chaotic and disorderly, which is normal when the present world and the abyss are about to restart. It signifies that an era of sheer turmoil is coming. Shandian muttered, suddenly looking up at the sky dome. Old Bai, look at the sky dome. It's happening again. Bai Yilin steadied his spirit and looked towards the sky dome. The dark red sky suddenly lit up with numerous white lights, like meteors, coming into everyone's sight. That was nothing else but fragments from the eruption of an ancient battlefield. They've appeared again. The fragments from the ancient battlefield that fell. More than before, at least 100,000 streaks of white light. Keep an eye on the brightest light and set out immediately. All the major powers and races moved simultaneously, and the scattered adventurers also did so without any hesitation. Earlier, on the first day everyone arrived here, the sky dome had shown a mirage-like phenomenon that displayed a grandiose and extreme twist. The ancient races recognized at a glance that it was the ancient battlefield, and although it looked as vast as a star, it was only a corner of the battlefield. And from that day on, white light began to burst forth. Initially, only about 100 streaks, all monopolized by the top powers. Later, it continued to erupt in bursts of thousands, several thousands, tens of thousands, giving quite a few people a chance to have their share. However, it was still chaotic, a scene of slaughter. Without a background or powerful strength, it was extremely difficult to get even a sip. That's also why Bai Yilin decided to split up from the rest. This way, everyone could go after the less noticeable white light, having more chances to seize opportunities. Bai Yilin also quickly made his move, looking towards where there were the fewest people. This time, the number of white light fragments that erupted was quite substantial, about 100,000, But it was still hard to get them. Those divine sons, young masters, and various heavenly prides from powerful races, even without any background, were still extraordinary in their own strength. Bai Yilan also noticed that the brightness of the white light seemed to be getting more brilliant each time. Moreover, he looked up at the dark red sky, not sure if it was an illusion, but every time the white light appeared, the twisted projection of that part of the ancient battlefield seemed to solidify a bit more. Meanwhile, on Su Qi's side, everyone also looked up at the sky dome. Such bright fireworks! These are not fireworks, they are fragments from the ancient battlefield, Lu Fan recognized. It's said that they might even contain powerful relics, but contending for them, Lu Fan shook his head, is too difficult. After all, while there seem to be many light balls, too many people are fighting over and monopolizing them. Unless you're incredibly lucky, and a light ball lands right on your face and you can leave quickly without a trace. Refining the light ball, being coveted still makes escaping difficult. Is that so? Anan had no such feelings. After all, he wasn't an ordinary person. He also looked up and suddenly paused. Why do I feel like there's a light ball coming towards us? At this moment, a meteor-like light ball from the far sky was streaking towards them at great speed. Don't say it, really don't say it. It seems like it's really heading this way. The sparkling light immediately lit up this part of the sky dome. Wait, why do I feel something is wrong? Just saw the scattered brightness. Didn't feel so big. Now why does it seem like a huge meteorite is falling down? Indeed, they had seen the light balls splashing out from a far place. But this world was not, as they say, completely changed by some force. Hence, countless people could see the twisted scene of the ancient battlefield anywhere in the world, as well as the cluster of light balls that burst out from it. Looking at it now, in their view, what was originally just a far and twisted image of the ancient battlefield actually loomed as huge as the sun or even larger. Similarly, the 10,000 streaks of light balls that splattered were not mere small dots, but rather chunks of flickering meteorites. The harsh booming sound was also rapidly approaching everyone, along with the oppressive feeling and the howling wind facing them. Dodge! And Nan, without any hesitation, quickly activated the power of the wind god, taking a few people and leaving the area. The next moment, boom! The ground was directly hit by a light ball meteorite over 50 meters in diameter, creating a massive upheaval. The terrifying power and noise slightly changed the expressions of Lu Fan and Rab. Once the dust settled, they quickly stepped forward to approach. At this time, they finally saw what the light ball really was. A broken sword? Rab was somewhat surprised. No, this can't even be called a broken sword. And Nan was also slightly surprised, but his reaction wasn't as strong as theirs. This is just a fragment of a blade. In the light ball before them, there was no complete sword or even a hilt, just a piece of blade broken off. Su Qi looked over. Although the blade was just a fragment, it clearly harbored astonishing strength, still extraordinary if one could control it. He wasn't tempted, though, as the thing wasn't shaped and didn't count as a complete piece of equipment. It was more like a consumable, and he had enough items, not to mention divine artifacts. Items of both legendary and immortal quality were plenty. He didn't have to blindly collect such consumables, as his current spiritual energy was simply not enough to activate too many of his skills, tools, and equipment. Spiritual energy really was in short supply. Of course, the quality of this item was quite low, not what he needed. And Nan just glanced at it, finding it novel but uninterested. After all, he was a divine son and not an ordinary one at that. His backing was one of the highest leaders of the God's Palace, one of the 7 gods, the Wind God. However, others didn't think so. Lu Fan and Rab already started to interact, trying to extract it from the light ball, their breathing becoming rapid and excited. This is good stuff, a remarkable treasure. The light ball requires spiritual energy to melt an opening. Come help quickly. Even if we don't use it ourselves, it could sell for hundreds of millions of spirit coins. We'll divide the riches equally. And Nan was startled. He wasn't clear on the concept of hundreds of millions of spirit coins. After all, this was a term from the present world. In his era, spirit coins did not exist or the term wasn't used. Su Chi, however, was even calmer. He only looked into the distance. It seems too late. The next moment, even more silhouettes whooshed from a distance. A large number of 7th-rank adventurers, stepping on various flying tools, had already hastily arrived nearby. They've arrived so quickly. Anan was slightly vigilant. Rab's face turned ashen. After all, the route of the light ball was always under scrutiny. Countless pairs of eyes have been watching. It looks like we won't be able to get it. Retreat. Otherwise, we will be ambushed. More and more adventurers appeared, with some already looking at them coldly. Su Chi also watched these people with interest. There were numerous humans, creatures of various races, abnormalities, and more, creating a chaotic scene with all sorts mixed together. Moreover, a portion of people couldn't even control their flying spiritual energy properly and could only rely on various tools and equipment for flight. These were the ordinary adventurers of the border realms, with weaker strength, but each with a fierce nature and a strong murderous intent. The next moment, someone already lunged towards the light ball. One person moved, and immediately more people burst with power. As long as they could open a gap in the light ball with explosive power of spiritual energy and retrieve the fragment inside, they could immediately activate their abilities or tools to escape in a flash. This was the thought process of those who made the first move. They all believed they had strong escape skills. You dare! Even more people scoffed. Why would they let these individuals succeed? And each one of them made their move. Various brilliant spiritual energy burst forth. In an instant, the scene turned chaotic. After several explosions, it had turned into a fight for survival. Rab and Lu Fan were unable to stay out of it, as others came at them, forcing them into battle, including Su Chi and Anan. These people, some of them aren't even here for the light ball, but to plunder others. Anan mused, pushing away someone who was trying to kill him with a gust of wind from his hand. That's the way it is, Su Chi said indifferently. It has a primitive beauty. Chaos was just like that, akin to the lawless place. Anything could happen, everything was disorderly, and fighting could break out at any moment. Of course. On the other hand, Su Chi felt somewhat uncomfortable because the crowd was indeed made up of ordinary adventurers. Not only were their abilities weak, but the methods they burst forth with were also unfamiliar to Su Chi. He had become accustomed to high-intensity experiences in various worlds, where he was used to enemies that could inflict fatal damage at any moment. Now it indeed felt a bit dull. Boom! A burly man with a headband and a scar on his face, with a fierce glare and a gruesome sneer, drew a massive machete from behind. The red glow carrying a deadly aura, aimed to slash at Su Chi's neck. Die! But Su Chi didn't even turn his head. The moment the machete struck Su Chi, the scar-faced burly man trembled violently. Because the blade trembled violently, unable to penetrate even slightly, blocked by Su Chi's thin spiritual defense shield. You! His eyes moved slightly, not in panic, but his sneer grew even more ferocious. You think you can block this? Break! An astounding release of spiritual energy burst forth, the blade suddenly emitting an even sharper edge. Buddy, you talk too much, Su Chi said as he turned around, his finger lightly flicking in front of the shocked eyes of the man. The entire giant machete was instantly struck with a terrifying, immense force. His palm split open, and his body trembled as he was flung away. With a loud crash, his whole body was embedded in a faraway mountain, knocked out cold. However, all this happened too quickly, drawing no attention amidst the chaotic melee where everyone focused on the light ball. Rab and Lu Fan were still fighting, and Nan was preparing to make a move to break the siege. But, the next moment, a calm voice rang out. Are you playing a game? This voice was serene yet sent a chill through everyone's heart. Despite the tumultuous battle involving over 100 people, the telepathic message containing spiritual energy was still clearly heard by every single person. Every eye hardened, and heads were lifted to look toward the treetops. An outline of a figure carrying a gourd and with red characters on his face appeared there, indifferently observing them. "What is that?" Some frowned, others sneered. "Gentlemen, seems like we've got someone tough here. Damn it. Kill him and be done with it." It must be said, people who attract animosity like this always manage to shift the attention of these guys immediately. Sensing that the newcomer was not simple, they acted as if they hadn't just been fighting among themselves, and instead, they all struck out in unison. A barrage of attacks hurtled toward the individual. No matter who the other party was, since he dared to speak up, it was necessary for them to focus fire and eliminate him first. Such was the tacit understanding among these ordinary adventurers. A deluge of attacks was already thundering down on that one person. "He's dead?" Rab let out a breath, watching the scene unfold. Su Chi silently looked over. He softly said, "No, they are the ones who are dead." And in the next moment, the man with the gourd on his back didn't move. Grains of sand blasted out of the gourd, forming a protective barrier made of sand. It was merely layer upon layer of thin sand, yet it stopped all attacks from penetrating. "Is this all you've got for an attack?" The other party's voice calmly transmitted this question. The faces of the crowd took on a ferocious look, and they wanted to continue the assault. But immediately after, the other party raised his hand and gently uttered four words. "Sandstorm, obliterate them!" The vicious expressions on the faces of the 100 people became nothing but rigid horror in that instant. Because countless grains of sand flew out like piercing arrows. They swirled in a dense frenzy, like a sandstorm, and their speed was as fast as lightning. No one had time to react, and even those who did, just as they deployed their defenses, the spiritual defense shields were perforated like paper. A multitude of stones pierced through them like a sieve. 100 adventurers were effortlessly destroyed, annihilated in a single encounter. Rab and Lu Fan watched this scene in shock, and they saw that surrounding them was a sphere upheld by a wind shield. Anan was pressing his hands forward, invoking his power to protect the four of them. "Brother Anan, this person is very strong." Anan spoke up. He originally possessed the strength of the Sequence 6, but due to limits, he can only use the power of 7th rank. The young man with the gourd calmly looked at them. "You managed to survive, did you? No matter. I'll just sweep you all away together." The terrifying sandstorm gathered again, starting to assemble a new form and strength. "Brother Su, I want to fight him." Anan looked towards Su Chi. His desire for battle was rising within him. Having come out for so long, Anan had yet to truly fight and release the repression he'd endured in the old world. Su Chi nodded. "All right, go have your fun." He stretched out his hand and placed it on both Rab's and Lu Fan's shoulders. "Let's move to the spectators' area." He promptly led the two of them a short distance away. He didn't stop Anan. Being a divine son who had been repressed for too long, Anan really needed a fight to awaken his heart and the confidence flowing in his blood. After all, Anan had been following him the whole way, and along the journey, it had almost always been life-and-death situations, with terrifying opponents like the Black and White Shadow and the turmoil of the Blood Demon Storm he stirred up. Indeed, there weren't many opportunities to take action. But no problem, the giant stage where one extraordinary being after another appeared was full of opportunities. And the voice of the doll quietly rose in Su Chi's mind. "Although I don't know what you're thinking, staying here to fight is not a good idea."